Okay, Alexander, we're ready to go. It's been a while since we've done a call-in show. How are you doing? How's everything going in London?
I'm very well. It's been beautiful weather in London, and that always puts a shine on everything and on everybody. So it's been a wonderful time, and I have to say the news is always interesting, and the topic we're going to discuss today is especially interesting. At least I think.
Yeah, one world government, 15% tax for everybody. It begins. I've got a theory. I got a theory about Biden meeting with Putin. Anyway, you were going to say?
I mean, in their dreams, is my opinion. I think the idea that this is going to work is just a fantasy, but still, there we are. I mean, people's dream.
Well, we were saying before that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, some people's dream, of course, is another person's nightmare, and that might be what this is too. But still, carry on.
If they were to make this successful, this 15% tax across the EU, across Europe,
which is possible.
Which is possible,
yeah.
And the G20 and all these countries.
Yeah.
Then I'm thinking to myself, it will be very interesting the amount of pressure that countries like Ireland, Netherlands, Cyprus would come under, because I'll speak as someone who lives part-time in Cyprus. If you take away their tax shield, that 10-12% that they have, and you bump it up to 15%, and everybody across the EU has a 15% tax. I mean, Cyprus doesn't have much to offer anymore. They don't have anything to offer, actually, after that point. They'll be in trouble, and so will Ireland, I imagine.
Absolutely. Now, can I just say, I mean, I think that achieving this thing globally, getting every country in the world to sign up to this is totally unrealistic. But getting the European Union and the members of the European Union to sign up to it, that is different. The pressure that there's going to be now on countries like Cyprus, Ireland, the Netherlands, all the rest, to go along with this is going to be huge. And it's going to come from the US, and it's also going to come from Germany, because, of course, Germany is a high-tax country, and France is going to be a high-tax country, and they're sensing that they're losing competitiveness. So they're going to really push very, very hard to get this done and to get this forced down the throats of various countries. And bear in mind, if we're talking about the European Union, there's a whole lot of people there, Macron being one of them, of course, who want to see tax harmonization across the EU. So this plays directly into their agenda. So bear all this in mind. I think within the EU and all the countries you've mentioned, Netherlands, Cyprus, Ireland, all of those, they're all members of the EU, or they fall close within EU tax regimes, Liechtenstein, Andorra, those sort of places. They are all going to find themselves under extreme pressure over the next few years, and I doubt they can resist it. So outside the Western world, what is now, I notice the Russians are starting to call it the Consolidated West. It's an interesting phrase. That's going to succeed. I think if you're talking about the broader world, places like Singapore, not a chance. But that's another story.
All right, so let's get rolling. I think I did see Spartan Warrior Queen in the stream somewhere. I think I saw her. Let's, I don't know if you're in there. Spartan Warrior Queen, our great moderator. We'll see. We'll see if she's somewhere down the live stream. Welcome, everybody. Valley S and Brian kicked off this live stream with 2 super chats. Thank you very much, Valley S. Thank you very much, Brian, for that. Welcome to a Monday call-in show live stream. Hello from South Africa. Vasya, good to have you here. Zisi from Lockdown Melbourne. Good to have you here. Melbourne, wow. Lockdown City. Zariel is with us in the house. Denmark is with us. Ireland is with us. Norway, Canada, Oxford, England, South Africa again. Awesome. Italy. Great to have you here from Italy. New Zealand, Spain, Essex. Cool. New Jersey. Right. The Great Reset can't get the time right. Hungary. How's everyone doing in Hungary? Mario in Cyprus. Good to have you here. Mario, Toronto, Canada. Right. Let's, Elizabeth, how are you doing? Who else here? Mark Hewitt. We'll get to that super chat real quick, Mark, and we'll kick off the show. Mark has a question about Rishi Sunak, and this is actually related to Rishi Sunak. The G7, Alexander, is hosting. The G7 is being hosted in the UK, and the finance ministers. The finance ministers had their little pre-meeting, and that's what this live stream is about. Guys, I'm going to be putting in the code for the call-in show in like 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes. Alexander, do a real quick intro, and then we're going to get straight to calls, and we'll talk about what's going on. We'll talk about this subject. We'll talk about other things. Real quick, look for us on Odysee, on Super U, on BitChute. Go to our locals, guys. Join us on locals. And of course, Duran shop, 10% off. I'm wearing my Canada shirt today. Alexander, 10% off when you use the code Real News. Real quick, Alexander, the topic, one world government. We have the announcement, 15% tax. That's what they all signed up for. I don't know how they're going to enforce it. They haven't really told us how they're going to enforce the 15% tax. This is just the G7 countries. I want to stress right now, just the G7 has agreed to this, but of course, Biden, Yellen, they all have their goal to get, I think, every country in Europe, in North America, and then, of course, all around the world, Asia, South America, Africa. I'm sure they want to get every country signed up to some sort of global tax structure. And of course, when you're looking at a global tax structure, obviously, you're going to broaden it out to be a one world type of government. We can also talk about the pandemic and the lockdowns and how that all of that fits in. You can discuss that as well, Alexander. The tech companies, real quick, the big tech companies said that they're all for this. And my one question to you, as you give us the intro, and then we take calls, and we'll look at the super chats as well. My one quick comment and question to you is that the big tech companies obviously agree to this because at the end of the day, I'll bet $1 million Bitcoin, if I had it, that the big tech companies already have all the loopholes in place, and they've already worked out how they're going to avoid this 15% tax, which may become 20%. Who knows what it's going to be in the future? But I'm sure they've got everything worked out. They've got hundreds of lawyers, hundreds of accountants. They have no problem with this one world tax. At the end of the day, this is going to really harm companies and corporations all around the world that don't have armies of lawyers and accountants. It's going to really harm them. A wealth transfer, in other words. The oligarchs must be very happy about this latest push from the Biden administration. Alexander.
Well, of course they are. I mean, I would say that I would not take your bet because I agree with you. I am sure that we will see that the big tech companies and, in fact, other big companies of the same, well, nobody's quite as big as they are now. But I mean, those kind of companies are going to pay exactly as much tax as they're paying now, probably less, actually, because obviously this kind of system is the one that they are perfectly constructed to game, and they will do it. I mean, that's what they've done. I mean, they've consistently done that in all the time they've been around. They will do all the usual games. They will pretend they're making a loss when they're really making a profit. They'll do all the various accounting tricks which they're able to do, and of course they know perfectly well that none of the great tax authorities around the world, the IRS or any of the rest, will want to take them on because they won't want to face the armies of lawyers that the big tech companies can throw. And that's not what tax authorities want to do. So, I mean, they'll be able to play this. Of course they will. The countries that will suffer are the small countries that want to try and make themselves more competitive, and of course companies that try and base themselves in those countries, or countries which seek to develop their economies by having low tax regimes. And why is this happening? And I think there is one overriding, very simple reason. We see in some countries, the United States, Britain being two, governments embarking on massive spending programs, and they're trying to cover some of that spending by raising tax rates. In the United States, we've seen the Biden administration raise capital gains tax up to 28, the corporation tax, sorry, up to 28%. That's huge. And we're going to see similar things happening in Britain before very long, no doubt about it. And of course, in Germany, they already have high tax systems. So given that that is so, they are starting to worry that these high tax regimes are going to make their economies less competitive. So they're trying to force everybody else to tax at something like the same rate. Now, they've pitched it at 15%. Because that sounds very low, but you can be absolutely sure that the agenda is get everybody to agree to 15% and then start hammering to get the thing raised upwards so that it will make tax rates for corporations higher absolutely everywhere. Now, this is going to do two things. First of all, it's not going to improve the competitiveness of the big economies, Britain, the United States, and all the rest. All it's going to do is it's going to spread uncompetitiveness. It's also going to assist monopolization, because exactly as you said, the big companies, the Amazons, the Googles, and all the rest, will find their ways round this. It's the smaller companies that will be hit, and they will ultimately be consolidated and absorbed by the big ones. So ultimately, this is an oligarchical initiative. It will end up creating still more wealth concentration than we are seeing. What is being represented as a progressive tax move, one which will be redistributive, will, I predict, have the diametrically opposite effect. Now, I have to say this. Within North America, United States, Canada, they will, of course, sign up. They will do this. The European Union will do this too. I mean, when you have countries like Germany, France, Italy, Spain, all agreeing to, all signing up to this, they will do it. So they will impose it on all the other EU countries. The question is, will other countries go along with it, which are outside? And bear in mind that the structure of the world economy now is profoundly different from what it used to be. And the answer is, I am absolutely sure that other countries, many other countries, will not agree. And especially the big Asian producers and places like Singapore, Taiwan, Korea are not going to have their economic competitiveness obliterated for them in order to satisfy the needs of the Biden administration and, the Johnson-Sunak administration in Britain. So what we're going to see is increasing divergence between the former industrialized West, which will be consolidating its tax regimes, and everyone else. Now, you mentioned Russia, and I get to say something. I think you said something, I think, but maybe in the pre-meeting about Russia. Of course, this plays very elegantly, again, into Putin's strategy, because what he wants to do is to get Russian money back into Russia. He doesn't want people to start putting their money in places like Cyprus. So from his point of view, this actually plays to his advantage, because one of the reasons people have been taking money out of Russia is so that they can put it in places to keep it away from the Russian tax authorities. But of course, if you're going to increase taxes everywhere, that incentive disappears. So he might actually, up to a certain point, play along with this, because for the moment at least, it suits his interests.
Okay, so real quick, two questions. Let me give you the first one. And actually, I think I saw Peter in the live stream actually was talking about this. I had it on my mind to ask you this. The obvious step is not only to say, well, we're going to have a common tax between us, but once you have a common tax, you're going to have the question raised about, well, how do you have a common tax policy if you don't have a common fiscal policy, a common governance policy? And so I think that's where they're taking this. At the end of the day, they're going to start with tax, and then they're going to move it more and more, once again, towards this one world government.
Well, that's exactly right.
Go ahead.
That is exactly right, because of course what we're talking about is tax harmonization. And tax harmonization has always been the agenda of some people, the integrationists within the European Union itself. Tax harmonization means ultimately a single system of tax, and that ultimately, if you have similar identical tax rates, why not have a single system of tax collection? Why not have a single treasury department at the center of all of this, which means a single fiscal system, a single budgetary system, in fact, in effect, a superstate? Because what makes a country, what makes a state, is its financial system, its tax system, its budget system. That's what the European Union has lacked up to now. That's what this is going to facilitate. But of course, if you throw in the Americans and the Canadians into the mix also, then of course you start to see why the Russians specifically are talking about a consolidated West. In other words, an integration of the whole system on a sort of much more globally centered way. However, will the rest of the world play along? I don't believe it will. I mean, that's straightforward answer to that one. I mean, I cannot see countries like, well, obviously China and Russia, but, you know, other countries, the Singapores, the Taiwans, the Thailands, the Indonesias going along with this, because I can't see why it would be in their interests to. And though the agenda, I am sure to do it, is there, I predict it's going to run into huge resistance before very long, and it will eventually fail.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to be putting in the code, guys, for the call in real soon, in like 5 minutes. Alexander, you have a video going up soon about the St. Petersburg Forum in Russia, where there were a lot of comments specifically from Putin, I believe, who also said something along the lines like the West is starting to resemble the USSR of old. And you mentioned how they're all going to be harmonized. And of course, people are going to say, well, how do you harmonize Germany and Greece, for example, two different cultures, two different languages? They're already trying to do it. How do you harmonize the United States with the UK? Well, they're already trying to do it. Though that they believe they can do it. They believe they can make us all the same. So we are looking like we're going to see a new type of USSR. It's really incredible to be talking about this, to be quite honest. But the G7 is coming up, and after that, Biden is going to be meeting with Putin. I believe that perhaps we're not going to be looking at a meeting where they're going to try to find ways to calm things down and ways to work together, ways to deal with many of the obstacles that we have been presented between the two countries. I believe that this may be a meeting initiated by the Biden administration in order to sit down with the Russians, to sit down with Putin, and to say, here's the deal. This is what we're doing. You're either with us or you're against us. You're either on board for this new reset, this new world order, or you're not. If you're not on board, SWIFT is gone. Things are going to get bad. And, well, you guys are on your own, and you're going to have all of this new USSR, like Putin described it. Is it going to be coming after you guys? What do you think of that theory? It's just a theory. It's just a hunch.
Well,
what do you think?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I suspect that it may not be quite as coherent as that. But the thing that I will say about it is this. The Russians have already decided, Putin has said that there's not going to be any breakthroughs. There's not going to be any improvement in relations as a result of all of this. He's expecting no breakthroughs. The most all he is looking for is a few months of things being quietening down. That's all. I think it's entirely possible that there are some people in Washington who are thinking of putting that kind of thing to the Russians. But if they do, I can tell you what the answer is going to be. The Russians will say no. I mean, they've already made that very clear. And I've been reading a whole succession of statements. I was reading another one today by a top Russian official, in which they say that they fully now expect that they're going to be disconnected from SWIFT, for example, that they're going to be, and that the sanctions will be maintained against them forever. So if this is what happens, if they're given that take it or leave it type of offer, they will say, we leave it and do what you can, do what you must. We're not playing with this game. So that's I think something that, you know, we need to understand, and which perhaps the Biden administration needs to understand. If they think that they can pull the Russians round, they won't succeed. And if that is the agenda, it's already going to fail.
Yeah. I'm looking at the live stream. Potato Biden. Well, we know that Biden is just the messenger, just the figurehead. And I don't even want to say he's a messenger at this point. I don't even think he's much of a messenger. But we'll see what what they're going to tell the Russians when they meet.
Yeah. I mean, bear in mind, for example, just to give an example, I mean, all this is coming out of the G7. There have been various hints at various times that, the G7 would welcome Russia back and that it would become once again the G8. They still talk about this. They still say in advance of every G7 meeting that Russia was not invited. And the Russians always complain. They always say, we're not invited. Even if we are invited, we don't intend to go. Why are you pretending that we are still suspended when we have actually said we have left? So, I mean, that's something that some people don't seem to want to get, actually, that the G8 concept is dead. And the Russians have said that repeatedly. And of course, some people just don't want to get it.
Yeah. All right. Let's do some quick super chats here. We'll take some quick calls as well. Alexander, there's some people jumping on already. I'll put the link again in a few seconds. From Mark Hewitt, which has to do with Sunak. Has Sunak just ruined the UK government's free ports policy? Interesting.
Well, yes. I mean, it's quite extraordinary, actually, to see how all the policies that were initiated, going all the way back to 1979 by Margaret Thatcher's government, have been completely overturned by so-called conservative government, Chancellor. I mean, this is, if you look at people, the sort of hardline Thatcherites within the Conservative Party, people like Alistair Heath, who is the editor of the Sunday Telegraph, for example, they are horrified by the whole direction that policy is taking. They say this isn't conservative. This goes even beyond Jeremy Corbyn's wildest fantasies, which it does. You look at what he was proposing to spend and what he was proposing to do at the time of the 2019 election. Well, this goes far beyond it. And again, I'm going to say it straightforwardly. I think it's utopian. I think it's going to fail. I think all sense of reality is being lost. And obviously, all those plans, free ports and all the rest, obviously that's gone.
Yeah. From JJHW, no taxation without representation. Bring on the revolution.
Well, I'm glad that somebody's pointed that out, because that's exactly right. I mean, if you have a system where there's a sort of global tax system, or at least, if not even a global tax system, at least a collective West or consolidated West tax system, how does somebody in Malta or Cyprus or Greece or Italy even, or even Germany, how do they vote in and out a government that actually decides what the tax is? What is the government? How is that government made up? Who determines tax policy anymore? I mean, if you do this, if you take this to its ultimate point, then democracy disappears, because democracy is based on control of taxation. That's how it all started. The English Parliament insisted against the king that they had the exclusive right to raise taxes. And the American colonists said, if we're not part of that, if we are not represented in the English Parliament, then we don't accept its right to raise taxes on us, because we don't see that, at that point, we have no representation, no word over what we have to pay, and that is totally a despotic system. So I think this is absolutely right. These kind of proposals, what they ultimately show is a complete contempt for democracy and for the whole concept of democracy as it has evolved in the West since the 18th century. And note, they are being proposed by an American administration.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, going back to your point of taxation without representation, especially in Europe, we've already been groomed to have government without representation. It's called the European Union. So we've been groomed for about 20, 30 years to accept it. So, we're just waiting for you guys, Canada, the United States, to get on board the EU train.
Absolutely.
Kind of like Eurovision, how it started in Europe, and it just kind of grew to even include Australia. All right. right. One more super chat, Alexander. We'll take calls. Korea from Sidebook VR. Sorry, Korea already has high tax. Citizens.
No, I know. Yeah,
citizens are taxed more than Chinese foreigners, with exceptions.
I know perfectly well that, but what I don't think the Koreans will ever agree to is a situation where their tax policies are decided in Washington. I mean, I've been to Korea, and I mean the Koreans have a very, very strong desire for their own independence. It's. I mean, they may accept a high tax system at the moment because it suits them, but they will not accept a high tax system because it suits Washington. And that's a fundamental difference.
Yeah. All right. Let's take our first call. We've got Peter on the line. Peter, are you ready? I'm going to throw you in to the live stream. Peter, are you with us?
Guys. Yes.
How you doing? Peter?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, all good.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm going to be a bit of a devil's advocate to some degree, in the sense that I'm not a fan of Biden or the admin he has, but largely owing to his cultural and views, as it were. But in terms of tax, I think there is a major problem. So I think corporations are not paying tax. I think there's a big issue with oligarchs as well, and with effectively oligarchy. And there's also obviously an issue with state spending as well, and deficit. So in some ways, although I don't actually like Biden, and I don't like one worldism, obviously, I think in terms of tax, that should be something that is manageable. I also work as an accountant, so I understand that if you had a proper auditing of accounts with teeth, then you could really, it shouldn't be beyond the wit of man to work out transfer pricing, transfer charging, etc., so that a corporation is paying the right tax in the right country. So I think it's all manageable, and it's probably commendable in itself. But the issue is, as you say, there is a one world, an ideological angle to it. But in terms of the actual policy itself, the tricky thing is that's probably a good thing. So what do you think about that?
Well, I understand your point, and I mean, I get to make one particular observation. There are all these very strange tax havens, which we in Britain are, of course, well, we know all about those. I mean, the Channel Islands, the Isle of Man, the Turks and Caicos, all those sort of places, which are essentially tax black holes. And I have never been a fan of that sort of thing. But I also have to say, a system where one collection of people decide what minimum tax rates are going to be around the world, or at least in a significant part of the world, is not the same thing as measures to control and stop tax avoidance and tax evasion. And bear in mind the point that we made at the beginning, which is that the very big companies, the Amazons, the Googles, the Facebooks, those sort of companies, and also the Exxons, all those big companies, they're always going to find their ways around these systems, because the nature of tax systems is that it's not just a question of comparing tax rates in different countries. It's the kind of systems that exist within countries, the kind of complex tax arrangements that you have the various reliefs, you have the various systems that exist supposedly in order to help business, but which ultimately disproportionately help one particular part of business. Let me give one example, which has always been one that has particularly exercised me. Big corporations in the UK routinely, to my knowledge, are able to pass off their legal costs, what they pay to their lawyers, as business expenses, which is in effect a form of legal aid to big companies at the very same time as legal aid to the majority of the population has been steadily melting away. Most people today in Britain who find themselves in legal situations cannot access legal aid in the way that they say they could way back in the 1980s or 1970s. But big corporations can, only it's not called legal aid in their case, it's called, in effect, a business expense. And that, it seems to me, is the bigger problem. Tax harmonization of this kind isn't going to address the problem that of tax avoidance and tax evasion in any effective way. That's my view.
A sort of comment on that is that I think if you actually gave the auditors teeth to actually look at global accounts in terms of moving profits and profit margins, etc., and also expenses, and I think there could be a step in the right direction on that, especially with the corporations, so I think the willpower in terms of politics to actually get that done, I think could actually have real effects if it comes.
Can I ask you a question? Can I ask both of you guys a question? Peter and Alexander, do you guys trust the politicians, the governments, to actually put those teeth in place, and even more so enforce those teeth when you're talking about companies like Google and Facebook and Amazon? Do you actually believe that the government, given everything you've seen in the past 4 years, that the governments around the world would actually enforce?
It's a big vote winner. It's a vote winner. So in essence, it really shows that Biden has the proper progressive credentials. So I think it will win him a lot of votes. And that's a critical thing. And I think it does appear to most people to actually have common sense behind it. If you're a big corporation, you should pay the right amount of tax. And that's on a lot of people's minds. So in some ways, it's a vote winner and it makes sense to people. But there are all sorts of back doors in there where they can creep out all sorts of crazy authoritarian stuff as well. But in itself, I'd say it makes sense to a lot of people, and it's also a vote winner. So I think it's a good policy in that way.
Why wouldn't Biden just look to enforce the U.S. tax code for corporations instead of trying to make this a global affair, and just try to put the teeth in the U.S. and in the U.S. system to just make sure that even if corporations in the U.S. or that operate in the U.S. are taxed at a rate that does get him the votes? Because if this was about the votes, then I could also name 5 other things that Biden could do, looking at the progressive base, for example, student loans, which would be even bigger vote winners. You were going to say something, Alexander, as well?
No, I mean, should we just let Peter respond to that? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's something that in terms of tax, he wants to stop. You effectively want to raise tax and also stop the opposition, a competition of lowering tax. So that's fairly obvious. I suppose there could be another thing, that if you wanted to really rebalance the economy completely, you may actually want to impose tariffs. And the best way of doing that would be if other countries, say China, for example, either wasn't enforcing these common standards, and also things like labor health and safety standards. They weren't enforcing all of those types of common rules that you'd agreed. You could enforce tariffs against them. So it might be part of a new alliance for like a trade war as well.
Okay, can I make a few general observations? I mean, briefly, I'm sorry to say this, but I mean, on the vote winning thing, the one thing I've come to realize from having followed American elections very, very closely is that the single most important thing about winning elections is raising money. I mean, it is, you cannot run a successful political campaign in America without spending billions of dollars. And the people who provide those donations, that provide those billions of dollars, I'm afraid are the kind of people who do not want to have the kind of tax transparency, Peter, which I think you are talking about, and with which, by the way, I am wholly in agreement. If you're talking about tax transparency, that is something I would definitely want to see. I mean, as you must know, there are all these places like the Turks and Caicos where you can set up a company. You don't know who the owner is. There's no proper filed accounts. All sorts of things can be done through those companies, and there's no actual way of knowing what they are or who they are. And is that going to be changed? I don't see it at the moment. This isn't part of the proposals that we are looking at. So I have to say, I think that talking about it being a vote winner isn't going to ultimately gain much traction, because in a political campaign, it's the donors who count for more than the votes, at least at the beginning. Once you've got the donors, once you've got the big money, then to some extent you can pool in the votes. Now, about imposing tariffs and moving towards protection, the problem with that is that, of course, cuts completely across this whole idea of tax harmonization. Of course, if you start imposing tariffs, then you are breaking up the world into different economic blocks, which perhaps is going to happen. But then, of course, that is a step away from the direction of having tax harmonization across the board. So, yes, I think perhaps that's what we will see realistically. But, and maybe, you know, many people would say that might not be a bad thing. But I don't think that's the agenda of the people who are making proposing these ideas. I think at the moment, they are looking to harmonize tax wherever and in whatever way they can.
Yes, it seems to be the case, I think.
All right,
Okay.
Peter.
Peter, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. Great to hear from you.
No.
All right, thank you, Peter. And let's see, who is next here? We have got to the one and only Zarael. Zarael, I am going to throw you into the live stream. Zarael, how you doing?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Doing fine. How are you?
Doing great.
Yeah.
What's up?
Lots of things. I've been listening to your both casts for the last 2 weeks. I've been listening to the Duran cast for the past 2 weeks, and I've been seeing a lot of things coming together over the past. I've been following this for years now. I just want to bullet point it through. Starting off with a YouTube cast or a podcast, I don't remember where it was, of a pastor who used to work with the elites in Alaska at a drilling site. If you look on YouTube, I'm sure you'll be able to find it if they haven't pulled it down. But he was explaining exactly what their goal was. And you gentlemen have been asking this question for quite some time now in different topics. What is the goal? What is the end game? The coup, as you guys refer to it as, and the Great Reset. Have any of you read it yet? Have you read that book?
No, I haven't.
You mean Klaus Schwab's book?
Yes.
I've read bits of it. I haven't read the whole of it. No.
Okay. I have a colleague who actually who's read through it twice now, and we discuss about this topic quite often. And everything that is written in that book is pretty much one-to-one and is happening and has been spoken about by this pastor. I said this is from around the 70s. I'd say late 70s, early 80s. He's passed away recently, so can't ask him about that. Now, my next question to you gentlemen is, do you believe in predictive programming? Have you ever heard about the topic?
No, not in my case.
Well, there are, and I'm going to jump into this conspiracy theory boat here. I mean, please, I apologize, but if you go into the predictive programming, there is a rule that is set by the elites. They say we're allowed to do any and everything, but we have to make it known publicly in some form. And as I've been watching this happening, these things taking place, everything that we've seen so far, for example, the coup, for example, the world taxation, it's all leading to one point, and I do believe that it is also in a certain prediction which we have written in a certain book. If we look at the movie, I'm sure you all know James Bond, Spectre. You've seen it, I hope. What you see in that movie, I think, is a very, very good description of what is happening on a very small scale. In comparison, for now, I'd like to say take the movie Spectre as a 16:9 format. Now that's just a glimpse into one small area of a cinema screen of what is happening around us. The world government is being formed, whether we want to have it or not. It is happening as we speak. But my question is, and I'm sure everyone has asked this question too, who voted them in? You say we have that in the EU already. Yes. But who voted them in? We didn't vote for them. And if they're going to do it on a global basis, it means giving up our absolute freedom. Do you agree or not?
Well, yes. I mean, I think I agree with you about the ideological perspective of some of what is happening. Where I think I am less pessimistic than you is I'm absolutely convinced, I'm totally sure it's going to fail. And I think that's I think the fundamental point to make, because you can only predict people's behavior up to a certain point. And if you try and control people's behavior, what you invariably find is that things don't turn out the way you expect them to. And I think that on far from this agenda moving forward successfully and purposefully towards its intended endpoint, on the contrary, what you see is that it is provoking resistance at almost every level. And in fact, what already we're seeing is that instead of the kind of unipolar geopolitical situation, which we saw in the 1990s, which was an essential component for this program to succeed, we have already seen a bifurcation. We already see the fact that the world is now again dividing up into blocks. And we also see greater challenges to the central position of the dollar system, which is the ultimate underpinning and linchpin of this whole thing. So, yes, I do think that they are trying to push things. Some people are trying to push things in that particular direction. I think those same people are very, very much, committed to this. But I also think that you underestimate, perhaps, Zarael, the amount of resistance and opposition it is running into. And one of the reasons why that resistance is becoming very strong is precisely for the reason you said at the end, that people do expect now to have some say in the affairs, in what is done to them. They don't accept a situation where they can be taxed by some remote authority that they have no control over.
I admit that you have a very positive view on that, and I do enjoy that. Thank you. I'm not negative on that point. Actually, I'm just trying to be a little bit realistic, because there is so much happening. For example, false flags, when they happen, there is always it's always a question that any good investigator will ask. Cui bono? Who profits from it? And the answer is always follow the money. Whenever you follow the money, the investigations suddenly break off, and we have seen this, whether it be 9/11, whether it be a voting fraud, whether it be an attack somewhere, anywhere in the world, whatever happens, it's always, you never hear about it. We ask ourselves, why aren't we seeing Dr. F, Mr. F, being investigated. We're asking ourselves, why didn't we see Hillary being investigated? These people, yes, there is a resistance. You're correct, but I'm personally a resistor against the vaccination. 20%, even if it's only 20% of the people, is that going to be enough to stop them? I think not. I do hope so. I do think that we have enough media in the world to circulate, and this is the first time that we have had this possibility, the opportunity to circulate information instantaneously, as we see on Facebook, etc., etc. Therefore, I do hope also that we do, grab the reins, because in the long run, we, the people, are the ones who are going to pay the taxes. We are those who make the law. We're supposed to be, it's for the people, by the people.
I entirely agree. Can I just finish one very simple point? I mean, you referred to various incidents and mentioned the word false flags. Consider where these events have happened: Afghanistan, Syria, Ukraine. What's interesting is, if you think about it from a geopolitical point of view, the US and the West is losing in all of these places. It hasn't actually, these events haven't actually played out very well in the end. The West is pulling out, the US is pulling out of Afghanistan. I believe it's going to pull out of Syria very soon. And President Assad looks much stronger than he's looked for a very long time, and he looks definitely the winner. Ukraine, well, I was reading a long piece about the Ukrainian economy and how that's almost falling apart. And I've just done a program, which will probably come out in a day or so, about how President Zelensky of Ukraine is bitterly complaining about how the US has betrayed him. We see Belarus, which is integrating closer with the Russians. You can try and manipulate things up to a point. You can persuade a lot of people of what you think. But in the end, when you actually sit down and analyze things and look at the longer range picture, hasn't actually worked out very well.
But it has been pushed over the past, I wouldn't even say years, I would say decades, because it has been running, the American empire has been running for that time. And it is gaining power. I mean, thank God. I mean, let's be clear, Vladimir Putin also has his own agenda. Very
of course he does.
I'm sure that Winnie the Pooh also has his agenda.
Of course he does.
So I'm talking about the Xi Jinping. They all have their agenda, and that is a good status quo on a global level, and thank goodness for that. And on a last point, I would also agree with you, Alexander. I was just listening to it on my way home, your cast, where you said the Americans do not have to be number one in the world. They will survive. It will continue, and I agree on that point. The question is, we probably see that globally. Will they realize that, or will they push the envelope to the limits?
Well, that is the big unanswered question. I mean, when I just said about the United States not needing to be the first in the world, I said not needing to be the first in the world in GDP. I think a lot of people in the US have become obsessed with this GDP figure, which is, I think, a very dangerous thing and a very misleading one, and it's leading to lots and lots of mistakes. But ultimately, that is the big question for the US. If they remain fixated with these things and they continue to be led up the garden path by the Klaus Schwabs of this world, well, they will follow in the footsteps of the Soviet Union, as Putin has just said. And he said, in firm and confident tread. I've just done a program about it, as Alex Christoforou was saying. It's not yet up, but it will be fairly soon. And you will see exactly what he said, and most remarkable it was. But the US has a choice. People always have a choice. They can look to their own country, consider its enormous strengths, consider the fact that its position is actually very secure, build on all those, and then they'll be fine. Or they can pursue these utopian ideas, in which case they will do exactly what Putin said. They will eventually find themselves in a very severe crisis indeed. I hope not an existential one, but it'll be a very, very difficult one for them. And given how important the US is, it'll be a very difficult one for the world.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen, for the time. Hope you have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zariel. Have a great week. Thank you. Take care. Okay, great. We've got Peter coming up. Then we got Christian and Anatoly and Sergey. Peter, I'm going to add you to the live stream. Peter, you with us?
Hi,
Hello,
gentlemen.
Peter.
Hi, gentlemen. I'm enjoying the program so far. And my reaction when I saw this topic, and at first I didn't understand what's this tax suggestion all about. To me, this kind of suggestion smacks of desperation. And I think they're not looking for the money, they're looking for the control. They want to salvage the global project. So they put out this project, this proposal meant to salvage the global project. It's not meant for actually getting money because they can print as much as they want. And actually, they will not succeed. It's desperation. It's a last-ditch kind of desperation. Just like I'm of the opinion that this so-called scamdemic is also part of a last-ditch kind of desperation to grab as much power as possible. And when it comes to taxation is important. I mean, some taxation probably is going to be needed, whichever form of government you have. And in my humble opinion, I think the reason for the terrible state in the world at this moment is the concentration of wealth in very few hands. I think there's research proving this as well. A country does not do well if the concentration goes beyond a certain point. Concentration of wealth in a few hands. So when it comes to, but you also have to have an incentive. Like in a communist country, when there is no incentive, people sit down and nothing happens. It becomes a great big stagnation. So, but ultimately, a decentralized form of governance, a decentralized form of taxation is going to be needed. What will happen in the next, I want your comment on this, if you think this sounds reasonable or not. In the following year or two, the present system, the present strive towards globalism will totally break down, and people will have to sit down together and figure out how to run their own affairs. And I think it's going to happen in some areas which are not global. For example, I'm from Scandinavia. I think probably Scandinavia is going to have to sit together and see how can we run our economy without depending on China or America, without depending on multinational companies, and how can we make the economy decentralized so that it doesn't capsize again.
Peter, I think you've made some extremely perceptive points. I happen to agree with you. I think there is a desperate quality to an awful lot of this. In fact, there seems to be an almost feverish idea to get everything done as quickly as possible before the door of opportunity finally slams shut. So you see this frenetic spending programs that you see in the United States and in Britain, many of them very unfocused, by the way, and probably going to end up in all sorts of strange things. You see all these attempts to get everybody to agree to tax harmonization systems, which ultimately can only succeed up to a certain point. That is what I also believe. And I think you're quite right. I think also you're seeing all these desperate attempts to control information, which is, I think, something you were also touching on. These frenetic attempts to sort of, cancel people and ban ideas and ban discussions and all of this. And it does have, to me, a panic-stricken, well, maybe not panic-stricken, but sort of desperate quality, a sense that, time that the time on this great vision is starting to run out. And unless we can make it work quickly within the next couple of years, the chance to make it work will once and for all have gone. So I think you're absolutely right. I think you made an extremely perceptive point. And I also think, like you, that this whole thing will ultimately break down. And I also think, just like you, that when it does break down, we're going to have to create a system of international relations and a system of international economy where people do sit together, talk to each other, do so in intelligent and sensible and appropriate ways. And that is something that will probably need some construction today. The major concern I have is that whilst I agreed with you, I do very much worry about how unstable and damaging that breakdown when it comes will be. I mean, are we just going to see some giant recession, or is it going to be something even worse than that? And that, I think, is the major concern that we have to have. And one of the major problems is that I don't think that these people who are pushing these things are going to go away quietly into the night. You can criticize the Soviet Union as much as you want, and, you know, it deserves every criticism it gets. But the one thing it did do is that it did go away quietly into the night. I don't think these people are made of the same sort of stuff. I think they're going to fight every inch of the way, and that could be extremely dangerous.
I like to respond to that, and of course I agree. They're not going to go quietly into the night, but this is a fight worth fighting, and this is it is a sort of when you win after a hard battle, that's the high point in life. If you win after a damp squib of a battle, it's not such a high point.
True.
So ultimately, we are in the story of our lives, and the story of our lives is really, really interesting. We should consider ourselves really lucky to be born at this time, when we can actually save humanity.
Well, you know what the Chinese say, you know, we live in interesting times. We certainly do. The times are extremely interesting. And you're absolutely right. I mean, it is an existential battle. And perhaps some of us would perhaps prefer to live in quieter times when things are better and easier. But that's the fact. We are where we are, and we have to face it, and we have to battle through. And of course, that's why we are on these programs, and why we exchange the opinions that we do. And that is an act of resistance, if you will, and it should not be discounted. It's not. It's not easy to do this. That we
you need great accolade for the constant stream of information, because information these days is worth more than gold. So thank you very much.
Totally agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter, for that call. Thank you very much. Take care. We are going to bring in who's in line? Christian. Christian, I hope you're ready to roll. We're going to add you to the stream here. Christian.
Good day, gentlemen. Good day,
How are you
Alex.
doing?
Good day, Alexander. I've never been better in my life. Right. And Alex, you know, if you have problems with the internet and the connection, come to Belgrade. We have fiber optic internet. Everything is ready for you. Don't worry about Cyprus.
I'm doing all of this through my phone, guys. This whole stream is through my phone.
I mean,
all right.
It's a very interesting subject today, world government, and it seems desperate. So, Alexander, how strong is Ireland to stand against this? I mean, I would presume that this is a part of their very vital national interest to attract foreign companies.
I doubt that Yeah, I doubt they'll be strong enough to stand up against this. They are very dependent on the European Union, and they're very dependent on Britain, and they're even more dependent on the United States. I think if the pressure is put on them, they will go along with it. They will obviously be very unhappy, and it completely cuts the underneath the basis of their economic model. It obliterates it, but I think they will go along with it. That's the realistic view.
Well, I brought another globalist with me on the show today. He's living with me actually in my flat in Belgrade. His name is Jamie Shea. I mean, to explain.
I remember him. Wasn't he something to do with NATO at one point?
Yes. He was the head spokesman of NATO.
Wow.
And you see, it's in the right way here. So I was, as you know, a part of K4 Norway, sent me down to be the spokesman and everything. So I bought this teddy bear, and I bring it with me when I'm on TV in Serbia sometimes. And the story about Jamie Shea, he was the one who invented collateral damage. And people said actually that I was the small Jamie Shea. I was in charge of the internet. I wasn't like spokesman. But I mean, this teddy bear, I mean, when you're pointing a finger at someone, I mean, 3 fingers are pointing back at you. So I was this teddy bear. I thought I was the good one to protect the good people against the bad people in Kosovo. But I mean, that's one fun anecdote. He's living with me here. But I have also another friend with me in the flat who was fighting against globalism. This is an original picture of Muammar Gaddafi, signed picture that was given to my friend, the ambassador of Yugoslavia, from 1976 to 1980, and his widow gave this to me. This is a very dear present I have. Signed picture of Muammar Gaddafi from I don't know, maybe 1978 or so. So actually, I do have a place. I have an eternal place here in Belgrade because the widow, she gave me a grave place next to Marian in his grave. Normally you pay a few €1,000 for that. But I mean, now I have the honor of being here in Belgrade, and I would love to see you all. I mean, I haven't got so much to say today. It's just, it's good to see you again, guys.
Well, your thoughts on... Yeah, go ahead, Alexander.
No, I was going to say, it's great to see you, Christian. Alex, I think
your thoughts on Kosovo.
Yeah,
Christian, what's going on? The news here. I did a show. The news here is that Greece will recognize. What are your thoughts?
Well, I hope I can disagree with you on that, because I shared your story that you wrote, and people didn't react too much on that story. And most Serbs, they don't believe it. They don't believe that Greece is ever going to recognize Kosovo. I mean, Mitsotakis and everything, what does he have to gain from it? And what are your sources for that? Actually, I hope today that I will write another article on the Duran. You see the address down below, the Duran author, Christian. Thank you very much for that, Alex. Actually, it is from Pristina Insight. This Albanian who works from Deloitte in Washington, D.C. He wrote this, Serbia, they're the bad ones. They're the Serbian regime, etc., etc. But whenever I am on Serbian TV, I encourage President Aleksandar Vučić not to sell not 1 square centimeter of Kosovo. Basically, there's nothing at all to gain. Maybe it could be fast-tracked into the European Union, but it's basically there's nothing to gain. I don't think there's anything to gain, even for Greece. So I really hope this is and we see that the countries all over the world. I mean, you have Spain, where you have the Catalonians. So I don't believe that the 5 EU states would ever recognize Kosovo. And you talked a lot about developments in Italy, in France. What what would happen if Marine Le Pen became the president of France and decided, hey, let's withdraw the recognition of Kosovo, because we have nothing to gain from that. Or if the brother party and Salvini can get some coalition government and withdraw the recognition from Italy, then there is completely new cards on the table. So
I hope you're right, Christian. I mean, I hope so also about Greece. The only thing I would say is, I mean, don't be surprised if Greece, or to be more precise, the Greek government of today disappoints you. I mean, the Greek government has a genius for disappointing your people, including its own people. And that is true of every Greek government that I can think of. I don't know what Alex thinks about this, but don't put too much reliance on this. And this particular Greek government that we have at the moment is very Europeanist, very Atlanticist in its political orientation. It's not, I think, as close to Serbia as the Greek people are, which is a different thing. But, you know, I hope you're right. I would like to believe that you are right. I don't think Serbia should depend on Greece. I say that with great sorrow as a Greek myself. I don't know what Alex thinks about this.
Agreed. Don't depend on people in Serbia that think Greece will never do it. This government, I think, is getting ready to do it.
That would be unfortunate. But if you look at it from a Serbian point of view, I seriously doubt that President Vučić would be daring to do this. I mean, it would be his end. I mean, the people would really be on the streets if he did something like this. And what is now happening from July 1st in the Western Balkans is that they're cutting the roaming costs. So with a mobile phone, with a Serbian subscription, you can talk without roaming costs in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Montenegro, in Albania, and in Kosovo and Metohija. And in North Macedonia as well. So this is making it a lot easier for the Serbian population in Kosovo to stay in touch with their Serbian friends in Serbia proper. So I think with this kind of roaming agreement and everything, there is no need. There's nothing to gain for Serbia to recognize Kosovo, because then, I mean, nothing is going to change. 1244 is not going to change. When I'm speaking about 1244, that's United Nations Security Council Resolution 1244, which regulates Kosovo and Metohija as a province in Serbia. Well, I'm fighting for this every day. Every time I'm on TV, I'm fighting for this.
Good for you, Christian. I have to say, I would also say something, which is, I think, what you were saying about other countries, about changes in France, changes in Italy. I think you're right about this. Now, about Italy, I'm going to be speaking with a number of people from Italy who want to talk about the situation there with me over the next couple of days, and that will be very interesting to hear. And I understand that there are people who are well informed about opinion in Italy and about in Rome. France is a country I know. And definitely there is a big shift in mood there and a big shift in feeling in it in France. And it could very well turn out, as you say. I hope it does, by the way. All I am saying is don't depend on the government of Greece. I mean, what was it that, Virgil once said, beware of Greeks bearing gifts. Not true of Greek people in general at all. But about this government in Greece at the moment, have no expectations, because if you do, I'm horrified. I hate to say this, you may find yourself bitterly disappointed. So but I don't think it would make any. I should add quickly, I don't think it will make any fundamental difference to the Serb-Kosovo situation. And I completely agree with you about the political implications and consequences for any Serbian government would change this position here. And of course, you're in Belgrade and you can sense the mood and the feeling in a way that I can't in London. But to the extent that I can gauge it, I think that you are absolutely spot on right.
Yeah, I have to show you my T-shirt actually also. I mean, this is the big guy. This is a very special T-shirt. It was bought for me. It was bought for me on the inauguration on January 20, 2017. And the guy who bought it from me died. So it's a very special shirt for me. So I'll continue to do that. And hopefully, I'm actually back in Norwegian politics. I have some abstinence and I couldn't stay away. I'm on the bottom of the list in the district of Trondheim. We're having some national conservative movements, anti-globalist movements in Norway. It's of course very weak, not on the level of France or Germany. AfD is relatively strong, or in Italy. But I mean, we have some movements now. We have some opposition. But I was listening also to Zarel. He was opposed to your optimism that this will ultimately break down. I hope I am wrong in being a bit realistic. But I mean, Zarel had some very good points, because we're fighting against some really, really strong opposition here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's be clear about this. They're not just strong; they are still the power. I mean, that is the reality of it. I mean, I think that power is rather less than it was, and it isn't perhaps quite as purposefully led as it used to be. I mean, if we look at the current president, he's not as clever, to say it that way, as you know, say Bill Clinton was. But you know, they are still the power. But, you know, that isn't a reason to give up hope. I mean, things change and the direction, I think, of events is against them. But that's the absolute reality. But obviously, nothing will be achieved without the hardest blows. And that goes without saying. And that's absolutely right. And what you're doing, Christian, in Belgrade is part of the struggle, just as what we all do is.
Oh, it's a big, long fight, but I'm in it.
Absolutely. I can see. Absolutely, and congratulations, and very brave, the things you do, no question.
If Alex would be approving my article today, I will have one more article today on the Duran.
Excellent, right. Fantastic.
Thank you, Christian. I'll get that done after the stream.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you. Take care. All right, I'm going to bring in, who's next? Anatoly, I'm going to bring you in. We have 1,422 guys. Hit that like. I haven't told anyone to hit that like. Hit that like, everybody. And I thought I saw Sparta Warrior Queen, but she's not here today. So if anyone wants the wrench, I think it's the wrench for the moderator, let me know in the live stream. And I will be handing out maybe one or two wrenches. I think they're called wrenches. For the moderators, I don't know. Anyway, let me know in the live stream if anyone wants to help moderate. Anatoly, I'm going to bring you in. Anatoly.
Good evening, gentlemen.
How are you doing?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep. All good.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
there's a little bit of background. A little bit of background in the back.
Background noise.
Background music. Or
yeah.
noise,
sorry about that. Yeah, sorry, there's a bit of a party going on here. I'm afraid I can't. I'm talking from a bit of a bad position today. Well, it's nice music, though, and it's not very loud. So, it's been a while. Unfortunately, I couldn't really get onto a lot of streams. Had work during the times that you were streaming and had live calls. And, well, today I finally get an opportunity. A very interesting topic to broach, world government. Well, I'm not sure if it will succeed. There are too many groups running. Actually, the thing is, I wanted to actually mention something. The thing is, you mentioned that the Americans are pulling out of Afghanistan, are going to probably try and pull out of Syria soon as well. The thing is, over a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to speak to someone who, well, he isn't from Afghanistan, but he's from Uzbekistan, and he has a lot of friends from Afghanistan. The thing that he says is that even though Americans are pulling out, and the Germans as well, there's a German contingencies there, the thing is that they seem to be organizing something akin to a mercenary army in Afghanistan to replace them so that they could continue their activities by proxy. And from what I understand at the moment is that the current population is very much opposed to, well, the occupation, as they say, by the NATO forces. So much so even that they have, well, the people who fought in the Afghan war against the Soviet Union, they are now saying that the Soviet Union wasn't at all that bad, that they were actually pretty good people to be occupied by. The thing, though, that I'd like to, the reason why I brought this up is that you're saying, about optimism once again. Even though the optics appear to be like things are changing for the better, in reality, in the background, things are happening to make sure that they remain the same as well. On the one hand, for instance, we saw what happened with Donald Trump and the January 6th. In reality, even though the populist movement was the strongest it ever was at that point, it was after that they used the globalists, I guess you could say, the people who are currently running the government, they used it for their advantage. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
Hello?
we can hear you. All good. We can hear you. Hello?
Oh,
Anatoly?
okay, sorry.
We can hear you.
Froze up on my...
We've never lost.
There seems to be a bit of a lag between me. There's a bit of lag. Yes. Well, it seems like even though there is massive opposition mounting, but seems like the opposition is taking major losses, actually, for me, because most of the conservatives and people who were trying to oppose this the current government that is from taking office, it was pretty much wiped out after the January 6th. Pretty much everyone was removed from all major social media accounts. A lot of people are in jail with no trial, I might say. And, the only thing I can say is that people will be more and more scared to actually oppose the agenda that is currently being proposed. So even with the two ladies rising in France and Italy, as you reported on, they still have to get in. And quite frankly, the forces that are up against them, it's kind of hard to envisage how will they actually succeed. What actually is the possibility for us to succeed? What is the possibility for any kind of change in the near future? Once again, who are the elites who will be trying to fight for, who have enough power, I must say, who are the vanguard, and I guess, who will manage to turn the tide?
Right, Anatoly, I think you made some extremely interesting and important points. First of all, about the point about the attempt to create a militia, an anti-Taliban militias in Afghanistan. There are lots of reports about this now circulating in the international media. That part of the internet, not the part of the media that we read in the West, but if you follow things that, circulate in the Middle East, there's been a lot of discussion about this. This is, of course, part of the old game that was played before, and in fact you see some of the same people that are being brought back. I mean, there was a famous Afghan warlord, Ahmed Shah Massoud, who led the resistance to the Taliban in the north of Afghanistan, and now they're apparently talking to his son, for example, who's actually not even based in Afghanistan. But you can see all of this is going on. To me, this all again has a look of desperation about it, because realistically, where the United States and its own military failed, I can't really see this sort of militia, to be truthful, succeeding. I think that sooner or later we're going to see a complete change of government in Kabul, and I think that when that happens, we will see, after a certain period of time, the situation in Afghanistan will stabilize, and I suspect that we will also see that new government however it is and whatever it is which emerges in Afghanistan, will want to reintegrate or integrate Afghanistan into the Central Asian community of nations to which culturally it obviously belongs. And I think you see a more stable, a more peaceful Afghanistan. And in fact, I don't expect it to become the dangerous terrorist haven that some people say. And by the way, when you talk about the Soviets in Afghanistan, I understand that there are discussions underway between the Russians and the Taliban, and have been underway for a very long time. And the two have reached all kinds of understandings. And I am sure that you will find that Russia will have a major presence in Afghanistan again, as, by the way, it did before the various Afghan wars began in the 1970s, when the Soviet Union was in fact the biggest trade and economic partner and investor in Afghanistan right through the 50s and 60s and early 70s, right up until, as I said, the various Afghan wars began, because that is the nature of the geography of this region. Now, what you said about Italy and France and the difficulty of the two ladies, as you very charmingly put it, gaining power, you're absolutely right. The odds against them are enormous. And what you also said about the situation in the United States is also obviously right. It is, what happened, and it is in fact a sign of the power of the forces that are arrayed against change. But consider how much they had to do and how much they're having to do to hold the line. It is becoming harder for them all the time to do that. And far from being, I think, very intimidated, I suspect a lot of these measures that they're taking ultimately are going to provoke more opposition and more resistance than we've seen before. And in fact, I am increasingly reading articles appearing in the US media itself about how the new US administration has already hit the buffers. It's finding it more difficult to get its policies through Congress. It's finding it more difficult to get its policies accepted by the states. It's coming under greater criticism. It's coming under criticism for its immigration policies, which essentially doesn't have any. Its economic policies are running into all kinds of problems. So yes, as I said before, they are still the power, but the very fact that they have to use that power all the time in order to maintain themselves is a sign, in a way, that they're starting to retreat and lose control. And I think this has been a story, actually, for some time. The very fact that Trump won in 2016 is a shock to them, that they have never really got over, just as the fact that Britain voted for Brexit is a shock that they never fully got over.
Let me unmute. Anatoly, you're with us again.
Yes, I could see. Well, thank you. Alex, I have to say, I'm always impressed by your ability of making such long speeches off the cuff. Well, small compliment there, but once again, it's just that I'm coming to ask who will be the people who will be able to make a change in all these countries once again. Besides the two ladies, who I don't really. Well, back to Great Britain. Who do you have there at the moment who can be considered someone who will be opposed to the globalists' agenda? Yeah. Because as far as I can tell, Britain is the country that's currently leading in the world towards this great reset plan, globalist change, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think that is actually both true and not true, in the sense that, again, one of the most interesting things about Britain is that, yes, we have currently a government which is still very much committed to all of this, and it's obviously currently hosting the G7, and it's supporting these tax plans that we talked about, and all of these things. And at the same time, Britain is also the same country which voted for Brexit, where there was talk about people taking back control, where there is a very strong sentiment against these kind of things. So Britain is a kind of crossroads. It's a political class and an establishment that is still very committed to following a certain line, which is the line that we've been talking about on this program, and a population that is becoming increasingly resistant to that, and a political class which senses that the population is becoming increasingly resistant to it, and which is becoming increasingly nervous and baffled about its own position. Now, you don't live in Britain as I do, and you're not familiar with the British media in the way that I am, and the kind of discussions that happen, not just, you know, in the big newspapers, but on talk show programs and things of that kind. And it's really very interesting to see how baffled the media commentariat, which is based in London overwhelmingly, and which is very, you know, lives very much inside its bubble, how baffled and nervous it is about things that are going on outside London and in the country, across the country. I don't like to say the provinces because that gives a completely, I think, misleading idea of how Britain is. But it is a strange situation in Britain at the moment. And what hasn't happened is you don't yet have a single person or group of people who can pick all this together and pull it together and make it all happen and bring it together in a decisive way. But, you know, don't underestimate us. That sort of situation could arise, and it could arise very fast. Britain is that sort of country. I've lived here since the 60s. I should know.
Yes, Alex, the thing is, I had an opportunity to live in Britain myself for quite a while, and honestly, I'm afraid that I was rather disappointed in the country.
Oh,
Very
I know.
disappointed even. The thing about it is that how I was there when Britain supported the war against Saddam Hussein.
Oh, yeah.
I can also remember all the programs that were running non-stop through the British media, how once they played this strange tape on BBC claiming that this is officers from the Iraq army discussing how they didn't show anything to the inspectors. And they had this really bad quality tape playing. You could hear only one voice in the background, very fuzzy. You couldn't even tell what language he was speaking. But the clear English interpreter said that no, we didn't show anything to the inspectors, everything is fine, no, we didn't show them, everything's okay. And somehow that qualified as evidence on live television, and everyone who I knew who watched the program, oh yes, definitely, this is definitely proof. Yes, the thing, and one more thing, the thing you're saying, I'm a little bit concerned with the latest activity, because the prime minister who was in charge back then, Tony Blair, he's been making a bit of a comeback in the media lately. He's being at all sorts of places, and he seems to be using covert language, saying to the current Labour, basically, you either get your act together or we'll be coming back in to fix things for you. Honestly, Tony Blair, the man who pretty much, a lot of people say, single-handedly ruined Britain, and managed to make it look like it's some sort of a party without getting any kind of problems. I mean, he earned himself the nickname the Dark Lord now on the internet, as far as I know. I mean, do you think if he comes back and his bunch come back into power, I'm pretty sure they will be able to steer Britain back into the right direction for the globalists in no time?
Yeah, well, can I just say a few things about that? I mean, first of all, Anatoly, of course, I lived through the whole Iraq War, which is a terribly dark period in Britain's history. But don't overlook the fact that, of course, there were a lot of people who went along with it and who swallowed all the propaganda and who backed the war. But there has never been more opposition to a single war in British history. You know, hundreds of thousands, millions of people protested against it. And be absolutely clear about it. It was the Iraq War and the enormous political backlash that arose from it that ultimately brought Blair down. I mean, the political class, the Labour Party, didn't really want to lose him. I mean, you know, they still supported him. But the fact was that support for him was draining away in the country, and what was even at that time a unpopular conservative opposition, poorly led, still managed to increase its support in the election which followed in 2005. And it's a fact that people very rarely know that Blair won that election in 2005 by a very tight margin, winning fewer votes than Jeremy Corbyn won in the election that took place in December 2019. Corbyn won more votes in December 2019 than Blair did in 2005. And yes, there is a major effort underway by Blair and his followers at the moment, now that Corbyn is out of the way, to regain control of the Labour Party. And I think that this is completely doomed to fail, because one of the great paradoxes, one of the bizarre things about Blair and his acolytes and his fans in the media is that I don't think they have internalized or accepted or understood how deeply unpopular Blair is up and down the country. It is a fact, as it turns out, that one of Blair's closest associates, a man called Peter Mandelson, played a very, very big role in organizing both the Remain campaign during the Brexit referendum, the second referendum campaign, you know, all those people coming out and protesting in order to wreck Brexit, and who also apparently played a key role in organizing Labour support or the Labour campaign in the recent Hartlepool by-election. And in every instance, he lost. And in Hartlepool, they lost badly. So I think the idea that Blair can come back, the only way that can happen is through political intrigues, which I simply don't see succeeding, because the British public is completely opposed to him and dead against him.
Well, that's certainly an opinion, I suppose. I hope you're right, I have to say. At least you put some optimism into me.
I'm pretty sure on Blair. I'm pretty sure I am, actually. I think the British are funny. They're very quiet, understated people, but they saw through Blair a long time ago. He's not coming back. Some people in the media love him. The political class is still built up around him, but he himself is, as far as most Britons are concerned, a discredited and even disliked figure. And I just don't see him coming back.
Well, okay, that's thank you. That certainly is hopeful, I guess I could say. Well, thank you very much for having me on. I will not take over any more of your time. So
thank you, Anatoly.
Thank you, Anatoly.
It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
Speaking with you. Take care. All right, we'll get to some more callers, and let's do some super chats real quick. Alexander, we got a super sticker from SGD. From Ivan, 20 SGD super sticker, which says goal. Thank you, Ivan, for that. GEC812 is a new member to the Duran community. Welcome to the Duran community. Also moderating as well. And GEC812 sent a super chat, which says a lot of what's happening lately, riots, Antifa attacks, legal corruption, lockdown, seems an attack on the middle class. Just the poor and just leaving the poor and the power ruling elite, leaving just the poor and the power ruling elite.
Well, indeed.
Societies. Yeah.
Well, indeed. And of course, if we do get the inflation, which I understand that Janet Yellen is now telling us was going to come, then of course that's going to be even harder for the middle class, because of course it's middle class people who are going to be most badly hit by a huge surge in inflation. So absolutely. And I mean, that has been the story of politics now and of economics for a very, very long time. Middle class people, middle class society, which used to be the bedrock of Western politics and indeed of the Western economy have been steadily eroding as power and wealth have become increasingly concentrated, increasingly at their expense. So I agree. Ultimately, I think you're absolutely spot on. I think that is what is happening. And I think a lot of middle-class people are still unable to quite see that, but I think as time comes, they probably will. And if inflation hits them in a big way, then of course they'll see it an awful lot more.
And GEC sent the super chat, continuing from the previous chat, which says elite buying up farmland while investing, creating frankenfoods more than Gates, pushing vegetarianism, demonizing real red meat, and targeting meat distribution. I like that super chat. They are demonizing meat.
Oh, absolutely.
They really are. And I have a problem with that. As a Greek. We like our souvlaki and our gyros.
We certainly do.
Don't demonize meat. And Bill Gates, stay away.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get to Sergey. Sergey, we're going to add you in.
Hello, gentlemen. Hello.
Hey, Sergey. How are you?
Hello, Sergey.
I'm okay. I'm pretty much okay. Have some health issues, but it's nothing major. Pretty much I want to say that it's once again a great honor to talk with you on this live show. And I will begin. First point I want to make is about globalization. It's about the topic which is the main topic of today's talk show. What I want to say, it's I heard all the today's speakers on this live show, and in my opinion, people don't quite understand that they understand the big picture, they understand how the thing's going, but in my opinion, the people, in majority of the people, don't understand the main thing, and it is that yes, globalization is on the way, and it's inevitable. What we are seeing now, it's merely the fight for the spoils of this globalization. Who will receive them? This is a major fight in our world today, and this is all what we are seeing today. The hegemonic powers of the Western countries, to speak simply, is now struggling to receive the most of the spoils of upcoming globalization. The globalization itself, it's not a problem. It's inevitable. It will happen just because of the development of modern communication technologies. We will see globalization right in front of our doors. No matter what we do, no matter political powers, which political powers will came to power, etc., etc., etc. The main question is who will receive the spoils of this process, and this is, in my opinion, is the main question of modern struggle of the countries and modern conflict, modern global conflict, which we are seeing in front of us today. This is my point, and now my questions. First one is about the reapproachment with the Russians, which is Alexander talked quite extensively on the previous programs and pretty much last couple of months. My question is, in your opinion, what concessions Western countries, US in particular, and maybe Europe, can give to Russia to actually sway them in their favor? I understand that it can be that for the moment it's can be this theoretical concessions can be seen as too much for these powers, but maybe in future they will change their mind, or the situation will become more dire. But yes, in your opinion, which will how much they are prepared to give, and more importantly, how much they should give to actually sway Russia?
Right. Let's take a few of the points you made. I mean, I think we've got to be very clear what we mean by globalization. If you mean by globalization the fact that, you know, people are able to travel around the world, people are able to trade with each other, you know, we're able to buy goods from Korea and sell goods to Korea and that sort of thing. Well, that, of course, is part of the development, the natural evolution of the world economic system, and that, of course, is going to continue, and we're going to continue to be, you know, part of that global world where, you know, we all share and do their various things. Globalization as an ideology and a system of thought and practice, it seems to me, is a rather different thing. Here, what we're talking about is an idea that some people have, that, you know, you look at the system around the world where, you know, people are able to trade. Bear in mind, people have always traded with each other, but, you know, able to trade much farther, faster, and economics work in a completely different way. And then you say to yourself, well, since there is these systems of trade, what we need to do is to organize and rationalize and order them in a certain way, which in some respects may appear to be more efficient, at least in our own self-conception, but which also means that we have greater control over these processes, and we're able to use that control in order to pursue certain political and ideological and geopolitical, if you like, objectives. So there is, if you like, a coherent system of thought which comes together and makes up globalization. That's a distinct thing. So I agree with you. If you mean by globalization, you know, the international system of world trade, the international system of communication, that will continue. But if you're talking about something else, what we're actually talking about when we mean globalization is something else, which is looking at an attempt to centrally control these processes in a highly technocratic, basically anti-political, anti-democratic, I'm going to use that word, way, in order essentially to exert greatest possible control and to concentrate power in a very, very few hands. And that, I think, is a different thing. And I think that while the first will obviously continue, we will continue to trade with each other, we will seek economy and technology continue to progress in a certain way. I think the ideological construct that I was talking about, I think that's far from inevitable. Its success is far from assured. On the contrary, I am quite certain that its failure is inevitable. That's the first thing I wanted to say. Now, on the second point you were making about what kind of concessions could the West make to the Russians, which would win them over, the answer is that they're not going to make any concessions at all. That's become absolutely
I understand
clear.
this.
That's become absolutely clear. And in fact, if you're looking at the language that's coming out of Moscow over the last couple of weeks, it's apparently proved impossible to pin the Americans down in advance of the summit on any kind of agenda. The Americans have actually come up with nothing. They say they want a predictable and stable relationship, but they're not prepared to say negotiate about Ukraine, discuss sanctions, talk about eastward extension of NATO, discuss arms control in any kind of meaningful way. So from the Russian point of view, they're coming to this summit entirely empty-handed. And the kind of concessions that I think the Russians would be impressed by on Ukraine, on the sanctions front, and all the rest are politically impossible in the West. And I think the Russians understand that entirely. So again, I think the Russians are looking at this process in a completely cynical way. They're saying to themselves, what the Americans want is basically a quiet situation in Europe for a time being so that they can focus their energies on the Chinese. Well, we will go along with that up to a point, because it also suits our interests at the moment. We want to see Nord Stream 2 done. We want to continue the re-equipment of our military. We want to continue our work building up, the North Sea routes through the Arctic. We want to carry out all kinds of changes in our economy. So we too would like to see a period of peace and calm, but we have no expectations of any real improvement in relations. On the contrary, we expect that before very long, sanctions against us are going to be ramped up, if anything. And you can see there's been an absolute battery of comments coming out of Moscow, talking over the last few weeks about the high probability that Russia will soon be disconnected from SWIFT. Now, that is really remarkable, because I can tell you for a fact, nobody at the moment in the West, other than a few crazies in the European Parliament, is really talking about that possibility. People in Washington and Brussels and London are baffled by this talk that's coming out of Moscow at the moment, because that's not on the Western agenda. But the Russians are looking a bit further down the road, and they're saying to themselves, well, this may not be the immediate agenda now, but give it a year, give it two perhaps, and it's going to come. So we're going to prepare for it now.
Or maybe Russians understand that they, in close future, they will make some move which will outrage the Western leaders to the point where they will be forced to impose that kind of sanctions.
I think
that's another opportunity.
I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I think we're going to see something happen at some point. The Russians expect it. The Russians may even be planning for it, and they expect that these sanctions will come. So that's where this is going. At the moment, the best that we can look forward to is a pause. And of course, if it's instead going to be, as Alex said right at the start of this program, of Biden coming along and saying, this is what we do. You're either with us or you're against us. We take it or leave it. Well, the Russians have already made it very clear. They're going to say to Biden, well, in that case, we're going to leave it because we're just not interested. You're not offering us anything. You're not addressing our concerns. So why should we go along with you when, in fact, you're not prepared in any way to meet us halfway on anything?
Yes. On the topic of globalization, actually, my understanding of globalization is the centralization of world logistics and resource management. And I think this is an inevitable process if we live in capitalistic society. It could be variations if the whole world will fall to the communism tomorrow, or maybe to theocracies, but as far as we live in capitalistic societies, it is inevitable process that the logistics of the world and the resource management of the world will be centralized to the one point or another, because it's how the capital works. Mergers of the big companies who actually oversee these processes are inevitable.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of people think this. I mean, I have to say I'm much more skeptical about this. And I'm also going to say something, which is that I happen to be one of those people who believes that monopolization and excessive centralization in the end are self-defeating, because they eventually lead to technological and economic stagnation.
Yes, yes, it's true.
And stagnation is never, in the end, a sustainable thing. But that's my view. I mean, this is a big topic which we could talk about.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's quite extensive topic which we can talk very long time. It's not the place for this kind of talk. My another point is EU leaders, American leaders, and I'm surprised Ukrainian leaders. I recently I saw some tendency in the Ukrainian leaders especially, but also in the EU leaders and in the US leaders, in young generation of leaders, the people who have not the top positions, but somehow in the middle, and who are currently only entering in this top class of politicians. And I saw the tendency that they all look quite the same. And when I tell the same, I mean I have some feelings that they take some not the brightest person from the bunch, yes, convince this person that he is incredible prodigy, just genius, yes, that his point is important, but only if he thinks and he talks in the certain way. As long as he thinks and talks in a certain way, he is the best guy, and he is a prodigy, he's a genius. And after this brief, I don't know how to say, after this brief introduction, this person are put in charge of not really big position, but some rather middle position, and that is it. And I see so much of these people running now in the Ukrainian political class and in European political class, and even to some point in US political class. What is your thought? Is this some centralized push to install such people into the governing positions, or it's some kind of natural way of things going?
I think there is a very straightforward answer to this. If you're going to, I mean, this class of people who, as I said, are at the center of the political system in the West, especially, they all have a common language. They all talk a certain talk, which is why, by the way, their language is so heavily cliche written. And if you want to join that political class, and you want to become a part of it, if you want to be accepted by them, if you want to get your invitations to Davos and to all the other various fora that these people come, you obviously have to learn to talk their talk. And these
guys don't able to even argue their point in the good way. They are arguing quite embarrassingly. It's not the brightest people. That's what I want to say.
I think you are absolutely right. And if you want to get an example of that, go look at the leadership of the European Commission, which is, as I said, at the end of the day, the absolute, center of this. And you will see that all of these people talk in the same kind of cliches. And the problem is that behind the cliches, you find that they don't have two brain cells in most cases to rub together. So that is it is. I mean, if you know how to talk the talk, you will be accepted. If you don't talk the talk, then of course you become very suspect and very rejected. There was a classic example of this with Donald Trump in his inaugural address, where he talked a political language which was entirely cliche-free. And he's talked in a way that the political class found profoundly shocking. And it crystallized all the reasons why they rejected him and were so hostile to him. Because even though what he actually said, when you actually drilled through it, was not so remarkable or so astonishing, he didn't use their language. And that was something that they found absolutely unsettling and unacceptable, and meant that he wasn't one of them and that they couldn't trust him. If you look at the present US president, all he does is talking cliches. It's the only sort of language that he knows how to speak anymore. And Barack Obama, of course, took the language of cliche to the level of an art form, which was one reason why his speeches were so difficult to read. At least I always found them so.
On topic of Barack Obama, he at least he was able to actually argue his points. Yes, it was not the best discussion, by no means, but he had some points which were actually correct, because all this, no matter how we see this globalization, yes, it actually has some pretty much at least some valid points. I'm playing now advocate of the devil right now, but it has some valid points. But the people who are promoting this idea are incomprehensively do not fit their position. At least for the time being. And I don't understand, is it some consolidated push to put these people in charge, or is it just some natural way of going?
I don't think it's a consolidated push. I think that, to be straightforward about it, people who are intelligent and critical and skeptical about things find it very, very difficult to use the language of cliches. So I'm afraid this kind of system tends to reward those who are able to use it, and that almost by definition means that the kind of people who rise are the less bright people. That's what I tend to think, actually. I mean that's how it works. You do get some extremely clever people, unusually clever but very cynical people like Obama, who understand the system and play it very well, but they're very, very rare. The vast majority of these people who talk like this, talk like that, because that's what they know how to do, and it's all that they know how to do. And that's why things are so badly led. And by the way, that comes back to an important point about globalization. We mustn't make the mistake of thinking that the people who are in charge are that bright. They're not.
Yes, I think you have the point. Another my question is about India, the prospects of India, taking into account the latest developments in India foreign relations, especially the joining of so-called Quad organization and some other major developments. And considering long-term the alliance relationship with Russia and India don't want to break this relation right now. I think I know that historical parallels are not always work, and they are, to say the least, not always correct. But I think that India, in the current situation, it's somewhat like Italy before the World War I. They are really eager to switch the sides and to see what will another side will offer them in this modern conflict. How do you think? What is the prospects of India? What they would be able to achieve? Because in my opinion, India is the next great emerging power.
Those are very, very perceptive comments, by the way. I never thought of the comparison between India and Italy before the two world wars, but I think that is a very, very perceptive comment. I'm going to say this: India has all the resources it needs to become a great power. And because I'm somebody who has a natural proclivity to be sympathetic and like India. I mean, I was, like a lot of people when I was a student, I took a great interest in Indian philosophy, for example. I mean, the real philosophy, the Upanishads, the Vedas, those sort of things. I've always been hoping and expecting that things would come right with India. It's taking a very long time to happen because it's clear that the structural problems within Indian society are profound, and they always manage in some way to hold the country back. But I still believe that the day will one day come when all of these things will come together, and we will see things move together in India very quickly, and we will see it become a great power. At the moment, I think that Indian diplomacy is going wrong. I think that what India needs to do is to play exactly the kind of game that you were suggesting, which is to keep a kind of equidistance between the two power blocks. I think the present leadership in India has allowed itself to be perhaps rather over-influenced by its sense of rivalry with China, and that it has tilted a bit too much towards the US and its allies. And I don't think that's playing out well for India at the moment. Well, and I think it is aggravating internal problems within India. Now, that is something we would need to do a whole program about it, but that's my own sense. So I think in the long term, they have a good future. In the short term, they're making a number of mistakes.
just for one point about the prospects of the conflict between India and China. The zone of the conflicts in the mountain. More than that, it's in the Himalayan mountain.
Yeah.
And the logistical issues to even imagine the conflict in that zone, is incomprehensible.
Yeah.
That India cannot have any meaningful conflict with China. It's simply impossible.
I agree.
Given the terrain, simply the terrain. Yes, they have some kind of disputes,
Yeah.
but it's so marginal. It's
Yes.
naturally could not develop in something bigger.
I
Okay.
agree. I agree. And I think that they should put that aside and
Yes.
focus instead on doing other things. And one of those things they need to do, by the way, is they need to rein in their defense budget, which at the moment I think is not working out well for them.
Yes.
Because they're buying far too many arms for far too many people.
It's overbloated, to say the least.
It's bloated and it's incoherent because they have far too many arms from different countries. And the result is that the Indian military is becoming a hodgepodge of weapons, which are not necessarily compatible with each other.
Well,
so they need to start focusing instead on their own internal problems. If they do that, I think India could move forward very fast. But it's trying to play a strategic game which it's not yet ready for. It might be ready for it in 10, 20 years, but it's not ready for it now.
In my understanding, they are just using the conflict with China as a way to consolidate the people of India, because they understand it's not this conflict will not lead to any major shifts, but we can make it bloated in the press and use it to unite our nation. It's not the best way, but it's still the way. And on the topic of the India military budget, I understand that Indian politicians are actually using their military budget is like the way to push their diplomacy, because it's the most effective way that is, in my understanding, that Indian military budget is used right now. They use this military budget strictly for diplomacy. They buy weapons from one side and make diplomacy. They buy weapons from another side and make diplomacy. Okay.
I think that's entirely right, but I think it's a very expensive way to conduct diplomacy, and it's demoralizing of your own military. So I don't think it's a very clever way of conducting diplomacy. But there we are.
It's a strange way. It's really, really strange for me. And my final question is, how do you think, with the prospect of Marine Le Pen win the French presidential elections and maybe her party gains a majority in the French parliament, how do you think how far she and her party could go in to this clash with the globalists? Is it will be only some talk, maybe more extensive than current Macron, but still talk? Is it will be some major shifts in NATO and the EU? Maybe it will be straightforward alliance with Russia. How far she can push, in your opinion, given the political climate in the France right now?
My own personal view is that if Marine Le Pen wins the election in France next year, which, by the way, is very far from being a foregone conclusion.
Yes.
If you look at the realities, if anything, the odds are against her doing so still. But I mean, it's remarkable she's come so far. But if she wins the elections next year, then politics, not just in France, but in Europe, will change forever. It'll be an absolutely seminal moment. And that will be the case almost irrespective of what she does or what she intends to do, because what she has come to represent and embody, not just within France, but within Europe generally, is so radical and so counter, all the things we've been talking about, that it will unleash forces both within France and in Europe, which I suspect even she would find impossible to control if she wanted to. So, but let's wait and see it happen first, because of course it hasn't happened yet. And everything is going to be working at the moment, and very, very strongly between now and then. We've got almost a year to go to prevent it happening. So we're not there. It may not happen, but if it does happen, I mean, believe me, it'll be a different France and a different Europe and a different world.
Yes, Alexander, I think you're absolutely right. This quote is attributed to Stalin, but it's actually said by Napoleon III that it's not important how the vote go. It's important how the country will go. And in case of France, I think it's it's close to historic realities.
Exactly.
Yes, and on the topic of this will be major shift, I don't think so, because we already had such a pivotal political moment in the US with the elections of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And yes, it's damaged the system. It's consolidated some forces in the United States, but still in the end of the day, it didn't change much.
Yeah,
and,
don't push comparisons between France and the US too hard. They're very different cultures, very different societies, very different political constitutional systems. As I said, what happens in France can be much more earth-shaking than when it happens in America. The political system in France, the constitutional system in France, is far more fragile, and it doesn't have the kind of, well, frankly, legitimacy that the political system in the US does.
My point is just that it is a question of how far the leader could push.
Alexander Sergey,
yes.
Alexander Sergey, can we get one more quick comment, Sergey?
Yes,
we got a lot more people on the.
Yes, I'm sorry. I took so much.
Just finish off your comment, and we'll keep.
Yes, of course, Alex. I'm sorry to taking your time. My point is, Trump, I think he could make much more success and could achieve much more and change much more if he was able to push a little further, because Trump, he wasn't able to achieve quite anything what he was talking about, and this was the major setback in our collective struggle. Okay, that's all I want to tell, and have a nice day. Goodbye.
Thank you, Sergey. Have a great day. Thank you. All right, Alexander, let's do some quick. Let's do some super chats real quick, and we're bringing some more people. We got a lot of people waiting. From Angry Warhawk, why was the mainstream media so against the Iraq War in 2003?
Mainstream media. Well, my impression.
So four, I guess, is the.
I think four. Yeah. Well, I think that they were very keen on this restructuring of the Middle East as part of this overall agenda that we've been discussing. You remember, it was the time of huge confidence. It was the sense that this was going to be an unstoppable force. Globalization was going to be an unstoppable force. The world was going to be remade. The people who were obstructing it were going to be pushed aside. The oil would be brought under control, and I think everybody wanted to support the war for that reason.
Okay, let's see here. Ernesto is a new member to the Duran community. Welcome, Ernesto. Theodoru Chipulan sent us a 1999 super sticker. Thank you for that. Paula Dobera, thanks for all the enthusiasm in giving us the news. Thank you very much, Paula, for that. Janet sent us a $49.99 super chat. I don't think I mentioned that. Thank you very much, Janet, for that. And from Didapon, can you speak to the impact of Basel III changes on paper gold market and commercial banks? A huge change coming.
Well, this is an enormously technical subject about which I'll be straightforward. I am not up to date. I mean, this is the kind of thing where I would need to talk to people like Tom Luongo, and really before I could comment on it. So at the moment, I'm not.
We have to do a show on it. Well, it
Yeah.
would be an interesting show because the fact that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the framework says that banks are going to have to actually hold physical gold going forward. I mean, that's huge, Alexander, isn't it?
Well, absolutely, absolutely. Of course it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll have to probably look at a dedicated video for that and how it's going to affect the banking sector, the world.
Yeah.
Because right now, I believe all the banks are just holding the promissory notes, the paper.
Absolutely, yeah.
Most of them, yeah. All right, Chode, Alex Jones woke me. That's from that's a super chat from Chode. Thank you very much. Moon Dragon 20 SEK. How will Russia and China react to this tax?
Oh, I mean, they won't be part of it. I mean, bear in mind, in Russia, of course, the corporation tax is higher. I mean, it's not quite sure where it stands, but I think it's pretty much, in the mid 20%. So it's a lot higher than that. But they're certainly not going to be part of this agreement because they've no interest in being part of this agreement. And it is an idea that the Western powers are floating, but they have no interest in harmonizing their tax arrangements, certainly not to assist countries that talk about them as enemies. So they're not going to be part of it. I'm absolutely sure of that.
Yeah. All right. From Raphael, 1999, super chat. All of the West policies towards China and Russia are based on prejudice. How long do you think it's going to take before Russia or China Chin Cheeks? That's someone. I'm not sure I can make that out. Before Russia and China, I guess, realizes that they're fed up with it. How long do you think it's going to take before China realizes they're fed up with it? That's the question.
Oh, I think they are fed up with it. I think they certainly the Chinese talk in that way, and I'm sure the Russians increasingly are talking. I mean, you only have to go. The person to read is Lavrov, because Lavrov, as he's the foreign minister, he has more license to speak about these matters than Putin himself does. And he's been giving interview after interview after interview recently. And the things he's been saying about the West, and especially about the European Union, by the way, which he clearly detests, and what he feels that the European attitudes are towards Russia. I mean, Lavrov's feelings about this are absolutely clear. He is utterly fed up with the European Union. He's utterly fed up with the West generally. He sees these countries as disrespectful, undignified, unserious, ridiculous in some ways. And he is extremely frustrated that he still has to deal with them. So I think that is already a realization which exists. And if you go to the Chinese media, which is less accessible to me, and that's one of the reasons, by the way, on my channel, I cover China less, not because I'm not interested in it, but when I go to the Chinese media, the English language parts of it, you see the same thing.
All right, Lane Maxon, €10 super chat. Alexander's grasp of where the world is going and his extraordinary eloquence, so cheering. And Alex has just the right touch. They're tolerant and kind to their callers too. Thank you. Thank you very much for that super chat. Elaine, let's get to the callers, guys. Let's get your questions in, and we got a lot of people on the line. So let's get a good conversation, but let's get the questions in there quickly, and Alexander will knock them out quickly. So KOST, I am Cost, maybe Costa, Costantino. Constantine, I'm adding you in. Are you with us, KOST? Cost? Yes.
Yes. Hello. My name is Constantine.
Constantine.
Good
to meet you.
Yeah, I'm good. I hope the rain outside is not bothering you too much. It's a bit.
You sound good.
Have a bit of thunderstorm here in Helsinki. Yeah, I was gonna comment on the 15% tax. I think, for now, countries that have a tax rate above it are going to be pretty happy about other countries raising. It's a problem for the offshore countries, for the low tax countries, and most of other countries, at least for now, for the starters, they're going to be pretty happy about it. For Russia, China, they can even sign some paper as long as you don't take some further. For the future, you don't have to do anything else in the future. If it's just this one step, then it's okay, it's fine. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think that's absolutely right for the moment. But do bear in mind what we said at the start of this program, which is, of course, 15% is a low level, which they've all agreed on to get the mutual acceptance. But once it's agreed, then I'm pretty sure that the push will come steadily towards raising it. They have to get it agreed first. They have to get the principle of a base tax level agreed, so that they can start raising that base steadily and incrementally. So at the moment, yes, I agree, it will be the smaller countries, there's people like Ireland and Cyprus, that are going to pay the price and are going to be really badly hit by this. But before long, you're going to see other countries that have low tax rates start to be affected too, as this gradually creeps upward, if of course it's actually agreed and implemented. But I believe that in the European Union it will be.
Yeah, sounds about right. It has a bit of this sense that they come for like small countries, and they're going to come for bigger countries, and then for bigger. That's a problem with it. But on the other hand, there's going to be probably very much pushback when they go for further.
I agree.
And if it stops at that point, then like, what's a big deal?
That is exactly right. I mean, that's the point. They start low, they tend to move up, but of course, the further up they move, the greater the resistance will become. And that's been the story right across of all of these integrationist moves. They start at a certain level. There's always the push then to lift them upwards, but then resistance grows, and sometimes the whole thing unravels. And actually, I think that's probably what's going to happen on this occasion.
Yeah. Okay. Another point, somewhat connected to this, you've probably heard about this big Next Generation EU recovery fund.
Yeah.
750 billion euros they're gonna push for all countries to come. I've been following a little bit this local Finnish media. It was a very hard sell here, and the right party, the Perussuomalaiset, really tried to block it. They tried to talk over it for a few days, so they blocked the parliament for a few days, but eventually they pushed it through. And like, there's a lot of hate for that in Finland, and I think in many Nordic countries, in these more paying countries, because they also see it as a sort of going for a common tax, like, they don't want to pay for southern countries' debt. So
I agree. I agree with you completely, and it's going to be. But again, be prepared for the fact that there's more of it coming, especially if Armin Laschet becomes Chancellor of Germany in September, which is today looking increasingly likely. I mean, he is somebody who has previously indicated that he would be open to the idea, for example, of Eurobonds. So you're going to have more of this coming, not less. And obviously, there's going to be more resistance in Germany too. There's going to be, no doubt, a lot of resistance in Finland, but this is a very, very big battle that's on its way.
Yeah, but it's going to be very hard sell, because even last time they pushed it through, it caused a lot of damage, I think, in the Finnish parliament.
I know.
So they had to fire some guys from Kokoomus just because they voted the wrong way. So it's going to be, and they pushed it through just because they said it's one time and it's never going to come back. And no one believes that. But if they try again, then it's going to be really, really difficult, I think.
I think you're right, but be aware that battle is coming, and they always say this is only for one time, and of course it never
only temporary, and then never stops.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the Zelensky comments I was reading about.
I've done a video.
Yeah,
about
I heard you say you made a video, so I'm not sure how much.
Yeah,
we'll get that up over the weekend, I think. It's the one that you sent me recently, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll have that up over the weekend. What am I saying? The next day or two.
Yeah.
Quite remarkable that Ukraine of all countries says that those comments. They're so dependent on Western countries.
Absolutely.
They make this.
All I will say is an unbelievably bitter interview that Zelensky gave to Axios. It's really quite extraordinary. And of course, we've only got Axios is probably rather watered down, account of what he said. I mean, but the actual quotes are devastating.
And it's just one interview. What the other guys like, they were also pushed against Germany, which was really even worse, I think.
I think that's
especially
right.
by the Security Council head or something. I don't remember his name. He's dead. But yeah, that's everything I wanted to ask you. So
thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Let's see, Alexander. We're going to bring in Otnosense. I'm going to bring you into the chat, Otnosense. Otnosense, you with us? Good afternoon. How are you?
So floating, still floating. So
good.
Everything is good. I always listen to you with great pleasure and interest. But today I had no intention to enter this chat. But the previous commentator, Sergey, made me do it. I totally disagree with his point that globalization is unavoidable, inevitable. No, this is the convenient obsession of every communitarist ideology, that the individual and the free will have no meaning. Practically, they don't exist, and everything is written by objective forces. The Marxist history never gave a dime on the individuals, be they kings or extremely important personalities, because the objective forces of means of production or anything else will unavoidably bring the outcome stated by the theory, by the ideology. This is completely false. And frankly, it makes no sense. Why are we living then? This is, and I will try to shock everyone with the next statement. The United States of America are bound from their inception to fight against this kind of globalization.
Yeah, I agree.
They start in their Declaration of Independence that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness are God-given rights, unalienable individual rights that they must defend. And pursuit of happiness means exercising your free will. How can you exercise your free will if you have nothing to say about anything? And another.
You're absolutely right. I mean, a lot of this is profoundly anti-American, at least the America that I used to know. Yeah.
Yes.
No, I entirely agree with you. Absolutely, yes.
And these forces who are trying to shape the world the way they are doing today, they are at work for centuries now. This is nothing but an insistent, obsessive effort to put in place some system, some relations, political, economical, that serve a purpose. I don't know if, as you mentioned, probably they're not very bright. They are too bored, or I don't know what's wrong with them. But this is the kind of existence that is too simple, too dull. People have many interests in life, and societies too. Of course, human interactions compensate each other, and you can't do what you please. But from this to being, I don't know, cursed to endure this objective globalization, which is nothing but forced constructs upon almost everyone, and it benefits a few, and we know and we see them. And what's the mystery?
Yeah. I'll just say, I'm basically, I'm in agreement with you. I think you must have realized. I mean, I don't think there's anything predetermined about this. I'm absolutely sure. On the contrary, I not only think that it will, that it's not inevitable, I think it will fail because
the collapse is inevitable.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, exactly. Failure is eventually inevitable for exactly the reason you said, that it is that is constructed and it's unsustainable. And if it were ever achieved, well, it would create a profoundly stagnant society, which is ultimately intolerable, and it would break down. Well, exactly, it would break down.
The end of history of Fukuyama's. It's an absurd concept. It's clearly convenient for the status quo of the moment, but the status quo never endures ad infinitum.
And I also happen to agree that, as I said, it's the sort of thing that appeals to a certain type of person, probably not very bright, who actually rises up on the tide of these ideas because they feel that they're on the right side of history and that everybody else is wrong. And of course, that makes them rather difficult to deal with and rather dangerous. But I do want to stress again your point about a lot of this thinking being very anti-American, at least the America of the past, because you are profoundly right about that. Not just about the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, but of course for much of its history, the United States built up its economy behind a wall of tariff barriers. It believed in protection and development of its industries and its own society. It did not believe, absolutely did not believe, in integrating its entire economy and society into that of a kind of globalized world. So this is profoundly true. And it's perhaps a point that a lot of people in the United States need to re-educate themselves about their own country. The United States became a superpower by taking the opposite line to the one that it is taking now.
All the post-World War II economic powers at one time or another put in place protectionist measures, must under any kind of labels, but protectionist. And about this inevitability of anything. This implies that there is no chance for a black swan event happening, which is absurd. Okay.
Thank you, Otno. Thank you, Otno very much. Thank you. Great comment. Thank you.
Goodbye, and all the best.
All the best. Take care. Yeah. That is why, Alexander, they want to stop teaching civics in the United States in the education system. That is why they want to tear down the First Amendment and the Declaration of Independence and all that stuff, for the very reason that Otno brought up.
Well, indeed, and of course, I mean, we can talk about the way in which they teach history now, which I'm not going to start on because probably some people will not be very happy about what I'm saying.
They know what they need to do to get globalism out there, and one of the big projects is to tear down everything that built up America, and they're doing it. They're on their way. Let me bring in Dr. Bill. Dr. Bill, hope you're ready. I'm going to bring you in to the live stream here. Dr. Bill, are you with us?
There we go. All right.
Now. Great. Yes. How are you?
All right.
Yes, we hear you.
Thank you. I'm inside now. It's rainy season in Florida, and you can't go outside without running into rain at some point. So I didn't want to get the whole show shut down with that. So I can't stand inside. On the globalization, okay, Alexander, the Oracle has it right. Russia and China are not in it. They're not part of that. There is the Russia-China double helix with now Iran as a full partner, and the Valdai Economic Conference it's just proceeding. I think it's over now, but Pepe Escobar had a terrific article about it. I mean, this is the Eurasian century. They thought, 25 years ago it was going to be the new American century. Remember that, PNAC? Remember that before the Iraq War and all that? Well, that's out the window, and the U.S. deep state is just in a state of panic. That's what happened with Belarus, and so Eurasia is going to be where it's happening. Halford Mackinder said 100 and how many years ago now? 117 years ago, he who rules Eurasia rules the world, and that's the way it's going to be. And I think that George Orwell, his map is turning out to be what's going to be, because Europe is going to have to go along with this at some point. Britain and the United States are pretty much stuck together. They're cousins, and they want their own way with the Five Eyes. But I think the what's up that Alex was talking about, when Fauci got jumped on, I mean, even Jimmy Dore has jumped on him. But what's up is the Orange Man, and it keeps looking like, from what I've heard, and I don't know whether I can say this on the show, but it looks like he's coming back, because these cases of these different states with the voting, as soon as this Arizona one gets run out, and it's going to turn out in Trump's favor, all the other ones are going to fall like dominoes, and then all of a sudden there's a new situation, and the military, from what I understand, is behind it, because they know that what happened. I mean, you guys predicted the whole thing the summer before the election, and you were talking about what this Democrat plan to just not allow the election to be called in Trump's favor in any possible way, and that's what they did, and it was all done by the mainstream media.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, American politics, I have to say, of that kind, it's still, I think, an extremely difficult subject for us to talk about on a live stream. Thank you for what you said about our coverage, which we stand by entirely, by the way, and I think we were very prescient. How things are going to turn out over the next few weeks and months in the US, I don't know, but I'm going to give you one. I make one observation, which is, just as I said to an earlier viewer, don't hold too high expectations of what the Greek government might do with relation to Kosovo. I say the same. Don't hold too high expectations of what the courts might do. I had certain expectations that the courts might make certain decisions at one time, and I was very disappointed when they didn't. And I must admit, after that, I make no predictions at all, and I'd be very careful before holding out any hope of anything on that front. That's all I think I can safely say.
Okay, if we can keep Biden from destroying the country, I don't think Biden can possibly participate in any kind of a summit with Vladimir Putin. I mean, you look at his address at Valdai, then he just did another address. He talks for long periods of time.
Oh yeah,
he doesn't stop, and he doesn't stumble on his words.
No,
and his winking, blinking, and nod, and his crowd—they're the third string, and the scrubs, and they cannot possibly stand up to
I agree.
Russian diplomatic corps. I mean, I expect this to be a joke, but the other thing is, Biden's Alzheimer's disease has progressed to the point where when he gets moved from his normal place where he wakes up in the White House, when he starts waking up in a different room with a different bed and a different decor, he will become confused, and it may affect his performance in any kind of a.
Can you just stress, Dr. Bill, that you are a medical doctor? Just for
yes, I
just
am.
to make clear.
I'm retired. Yes. I'm retired, but I still have a brain. Yes. I practiced 34 years.
Just to make it clear, yeah.
And I can think. So yes, I've seen that since before the election. Now the other thing is on the Fauci down. What's happened is there's been so much pushback from so many doctors. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds and thousands of doctors around the world who are doing things that the CDC and the WHO said not to do, like using hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. I mean, even Jimmy Dore now is talking about it. He's on ivermectin, and he had a problem with the injection, and it's really affected his performance. And but he's seeing the right doctors. America's frontline doctors are right in his area. And I think he's seeing one of them. They put him on ivermectin, which is what they should do.
Yeah. Well, indeed. I mean, can I just say, I mean, one of the great problems about this whole issue is that, first of all, very few of us who are not doctors or scientists, I think, are in a really good position to comment about certainly particular treatments. And unfortunately, when you have discovered that one person in particular, who we were all told was an authority, is not an authority, but has been saying things behind the scenes which are not the same as what he was saying in public, well, that is very dismaying. And I think that is going to have big implications for the future. This is a very, very big issue, actually, that's come up. I've always had my concerns about Dr. F, and I say straightforwardly why. I have, in the past, been in a fairly minor, but not so minor way, an advisor to ministers, both in Greece and in Britain. And I found that his conduct of himself, in which he was, as far as I was concerned, undermining the person that he was supposed to be giving advice to, I found that deeply problematic. And I'm using very careful language indeed. Problematic, I think others would use stronger words than me.
Yes, Patrick Henningsen on 21st Century Wire had an excellent program this past Sunday and explaining what the Wuhan thing. He feels, and I feel too, that this was basically a trap set to demonize China because China is seen as the big rival by the U.S. deep state. There, this pivot to Asia started, 10 years ago or more, and China's the one they're worried about because China is going to have the biggest economy in the world. I mean, the Chinese are businessmen. That's what they do. They don't make wars. They're not going to invade Taiwan. They don't need to. And they don't have the mind to. And they're not going to invade these other countries that Blinken is talking about. They're businessmen, and they're going to clean up. As it was found out in the Valdai conference just in the past several days.
Right. Yes. Well, I think you're right.
So yes, people should listen to that 21 Wire program that was just this past Sunday.
Right.
CenturyWire.com.
Right.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Talking to you. And I'm waiting for the rain to start here in Florida.
Awesome. All the best to everyone in Florida. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bill. Take care.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. All right. Alexander, we'll take two more calls and we'll do the live chats, super chats.
Right.
Let's see. Who do we have here? We have Google whistleblower here. Tarif.
Thanks for taking my call, man.
You're live.
First, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Right, first, I was about to panic. Okay. All right. First, free Julian Assange. I gotta throw that out there. Free Denziger, and also free West Papua New Guinea. They need their own nation back. Okay, I have like 3 or 4 things I want to talk about. I'm gonna try to make them quick as possible. Here I go. The election. I was reading it yesterday. Maricopa County in Arizona, they should be finished by the end of this month, counting the 2.1 million ballots and dealing with the voting machines, the ballot counters in Arizona, right? Maricopa County. Georgia, they starting the process. The judge let them start the process to look at Fulton County, 145,000 absentee ballots, right? So that's 2 states. Third state, Wisconsin, they hired 3 ex-cops to see if any fraud took place. And that report should be done in the beginning of this fall coming up. Michigan, Antoine County, the judge threw out the lawsuit for to count the 10 or 16,000 votes that the lawyer wanted to audit. But the Republicans in Michigan is talking about hiring a third party contractors to audit the vote, but it's still a fight between them and the Democrats. Pennsylvania, the Republicans is fighting each other, and also they got to deal with the Democratic governor talking about if anything passed in the legislation dealing with an audit, he's going to veto. So that's where you stand at right now. So you can't still keep your hopes up high, but you still a fight going on with that. At least you have 2 states, and you got a third state, Wisconsin, is on the fence. So there you go with that. Okay. China had the woman, forgot her name. She's in the military, I guess. She deal with medicines, right, to fight diseases and viruses. She came up with medicine to inoculate people against Ebola some years ago. She also came up with the medicine to fight against 19. 2-3 days ago, I saw that Sinopharm, which is the company that she's control. Well, I won't say. Well, she's the CEO of the company, the president of the Sinopharm in China. Developed. Guess what they developed? An inhaler medicine. All right, which is a V. You know, is I don't want to say the word, but so it's go straight to the lungs to attack 19 when you inhale it. And it's cheaper, and the same type of vial that you pour it out of that go into one person, that same vial can treat 5 people. All right? Which means instead of treating one person with the normal, typical jab in the arm, you can treat 5 people off that same vial, off the inhaler version, at a cheaper rate too. So you already know that they just jumped over Pfizer with that. Okay? In a lot of countries, I feel to believe in the next 6 months to a year that they're gonna start asking for it. Because I believe I've been watching programs throughout the world. A lot of people is very worried of that, of the getting the jab. All right. So you have other methods that maybe people might willing to take, which is a good thing. I'm gonna have to look for that. It's a YouTube channel that's pro that I got this from. Is a YouTube channel that's see the world through the Chinese eyes. I want to say Chinese through the Chinese government eyes, right? I'm gonna share that with y'all, and it's like a robot voice, but it's like you can tell somebody is putting it together that know what they're talking about. So I'm gonna share that with y'all on y'all Discord, and I'm gonna share the other articles dealing with the vote, all that, on your Discord too. I I won't marry Le Pen to win. I know she's right wing. I know she's somewhat kind of tough on immigration. Her and the right wing Five Star Party in Italy. I've been listening to Kagame lately and some other people in Africa. Five Star Party, they was tough on immigration, but at the same time, they knew that Africa do need help when it comes to like low interest loans and manufacturing jobs. The reason why Europe have a lot of immigrants coming now to work these low labor jobs, which is driving down the wage prices in Europe, is because Africa really don't have that much. So if Gaddafi would have never got assassinated, that he would have been working more and more with China and Italy, establishing oil refineries, water waste treatment plants, things of that nature, giving people jobs. And that's what the rest of Africa want to go. And I think Le Pen, I know she's right wing, but at the same time, I think she has common sense. Hopefully, that she can sit down with the African leaders and come up with a proposal to give them low interest loans to build power plants and things of that nature, fulfilling these job market gaps that Africa need, where you won't have so many Africans going to Europe and things getting worse for them because they got to experience racism and stuff. But if they stay at home and learn the skills, or go to Europe and learn the trades, they kind of go back to Ghana and Congo and Nigeria to work, then it will build up their own infrastructure, like Ghana doing with the $60 billion hub project that they're working with the people out of different parts of the United States and also Belarus, and their own investment firms in Ghana, working with the Chinese and whatnot, which is a good thing. So I look at the world somewhat different from a lot of people. The immigration thing, the reason why people migrate to different parts of the world is because the lack of jobs where they at. The only reason why Mexicans and Venezuelans and Honduras migrate to America because of the lack of jobs in Central and South America. And I remember I believed the hype one time that the reason why they come in here is because they like our freedom, they like this, they like that. The reason why they come in here is because they need jobs. I talked to a guy that was from southern Mexico. He told me he didn't want to come to the United States, but he was forced to because it was a lack of jobs. And he told me, he painted a picture of it where he was from. And they had the mountains, you had a lake, and he owned the property. His family owned that property for hundreds of years. And it was just how the way he broke it down. I wanted to go down there and live, And he said, man, once I retire here, I'm going back. And I'm gonna live like a champion down there. All the money I saved when I was working up here. And I start, so when I start looking at the Hispanic population in the United States, I start thinking, I say, they're here to make a living, so they're gonna go back so they can have at least a decent retirement. And I think AMLO is trying to give them that in Mexico by trying to start up an infrastructure program. But yet he's got to deal with the globalists that's messing with the elections down there, because they were supposed to win so many seats and it didn't happen. They were supposed to win over 300 seats. It didn't happen. And the groups that he's fighting against, man, they're really giving it to his party. Over 30 candidates was assassinated in Mexico. They was talking about having sweeping farms, programs down there. So he got to deal with the NGOs. Oh yeah, he got to deal with the NGOs too. That's trying to create all havoc. He got to deal with the cartels that's being backed by the so-called globalists, CIA, and it's a lot for him. So it's a struggle, and Africa, Central South America got to focus on their own countries to build up the infrastructure. They got to get the low interest loans from China, maybe Russia, and who else will give it to them so they can build up their countries, or they're gonna always be on their knees with their hands out, and I don't like that. Kagame don't like that. The president from Ghana don't like that. You know, they want to be equal partners in the world with Switzerland and France and this and that and the other. And I think if Le Pen get in there, that she might hopefully sit down with the African leaders, especially in the French-speaking parts, and work out a deal with them. You know, low-interest loans, and I'm pretty sure French people need jobs. They can go down to Africa and work and teach people how to become machinists and welders and sheet metal mechanics, structural fitters, plumbers, electricians, and they can take them resources, them trades, and build up the nation. Right? That's what Africa need. They need the engineers, they need the physicists, they need the medical doctors, they need the nurses. So it's funny that I'm having a tough time trying to explain myself that sometimes people you think that's your enemy is really not your enemy. Sometimes you think people is your friend is really not your friend. So I think it'd be good for Africa if Le Pen would get in, because Le Pen will probably cut off the aid, but at the same time will sit down and say, look, I'd rather give you a low interest loan for infrastructure building instead of aid. Because aid ain't nothing going to happen with aid. What you was about to say, Alex?
No. Tarif, I can't predict what Marine Le Pen's foreign policy towards Africa will be. But this is all I'm going to say about it, which is that, to my knowledge, and to the extent that I've been able to follow her, the evolution of her ideas, she is very, very close in her ideas generally to those of de Gaulle, who was the leader of France in the 1960s. Now, de Gaulle took very tough lines. He was right wing. He was a conservative, a Christian Catholic leader. He wanted to keep French culture intact. He also maintained excellent relations with African states. He made a major play of developing very strong relations with African states. He was also the French leader who in 1964 recognized the People's Republic of China and established diplomatic relations with China, and in fact had a good relationship with China in general, to the extent that anybody could in the 1960s. And of course, he also went ahead and had very close and friendly relations with the Soviet Union, which he never, by the way, referred to as the Soviet Union. He always insisted on calling it Russia. So it seems to me that to the extent that Le Pen seems to be a throwback to Gaullist policies, it's quite likely, I would say, I'd guess it's very likely that she could have good relations with African states, just as de Gaulle did in the 1960s, given that the rest of her foreign policy and much of her domestic policy seems to be very similar to de Gaulle's. So I think that's quite possible. I would add that de Gaulle was a strong anti-imperialist, which to some extent Le Pen, in terms of the modern world, also is. And of course, like de Gaulle, Le Pen has difficulties, I'm putting it mildly, with the Americans at the moment. I mean, so I think that, you know, we could see a lot of the same things happen. And I think it's more than likely that a Le Pen as president would seek good relations with African countries and would work with African countries in a fairly successful way. I can't predict that's what would happen, but certainly that seems to me quite likely.
Okay, my last comment. I like the doctor from Florida, Dr. Bill. He's a good man. I wish he was still being a doctor. Maybe I can deal with him. But I disagree with him with the with the Taiwan situation. If Taiwan declared independence, then China mainland would see them as a traitor, and it would be forced to invade them for geopolitical and tactical reasons. General MacArthur said something some years ago. Taiwan is an unsinkable aircraft carrier. It's only so many hundreds of kilometers or hundreds of miles away from China mainland. So they would be forced from a military strategic standpoint to invade it. They have no choice. I don't want them to, but they have to. They remember the shipment from last year that the Trump administration was shipping out to them $6 to $7 billion worth of arms, and one of those offensive weapons that it was sending them was cruise missiles, Tomahawks. We all know Tomahawks can be outfitted with. I'm not going to say the word. So China will invade it. I forgot his name. The nationalist leader of China back in the 30s, 40s that came to the United States and studied. Chiang Kai-shek. He never declared independence because he didn't want to be seen as a traitor, and so for other people that came after him never declared independence because Taiwan see themselves as China. They see themselves as the rightful rulers of the government. All right. He's never been buried. From what I understand, he's never been buried yet. Him and Mao never been buried yet. But they say when they unite, that they're gonna be buried together, and symbolizing the uniting of Taiwan, and China. So it's very deep. I didn't know it till I saw that little program. I'm like, oh my God, is that deep? So yeah. So I'm trying to think if I can say something else. I had something else floating in my mind, but don't put your hopes up on for the elections. We still got a lot of things going on,
Well, we'll see. I mean, I just come back to what I said about the elections. Don't rest too many hopes on court decisions. That's all I'm going to say about that. Now, on China and Taiwan, I did a program about that on my channel some weeks ago. The Chinese have made it absolutely clear that if Taiwan decides to declare independence, they reserve the right to use force against Taiwan, and if America gets in the way, America might have a fight on its hands. Now, whether or not whether that will ever happen, whether we will ever get into that situation, I don't know. But the Chinese have openly said that they are prepared to use force if Taiwan breaks away. So I think we shouldn't assume that that is a bluff. On the contrary, as I often say, if you try and bluff China, what invariably happens is that your bluff is called. That is the first law of diplomacy, which everyone should follow. So up to that point, I'm in agreement with you.
Yes. And also when China buy Russian equipment, they make it better because the technology is getting better and better. And by 2030, they will surpass the United States and Russia in technology.
Well,
R&D, research and development.
I wouldn't be surprised. Thank you very much, Tarif.
Thank you, Tarif. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to last two callers, James and Abdul Kahar. Last two callers, James and Abdul Kahar. Let's move along. James, you're with us. Are you there, James?
Hello.
Yes.
Hello. Yeah.
Hi. How are you?
Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm calling from Perth, Australia.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Hello to everyone in Perth.
It's kind of late here, but anyway. I was just calling about your comments about the lockdown situation in Australia and how absurd it must seem to the outside world. I guess people have seen the images in Melbourne of people, the police knocking down doors for people making, bashing at people's doors for making rude comments on Facebook, and how quickly it looks like we've descended into a police state based on very few cases. It seems like Australians are in a sort of state of trauma, even though they actually haven't suffered a great deal.
Mm-hmm.
It was very easy for us to sort of slam down the. When it all sort of kicked off, we just closed the borders essentially and flattened the curve, and everything tailed down, and we've been shut off from the rest of the world, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we've been seeing what's going on in the rest of the world, and it's almost like we've internalized that, and we made that our own suffering, and even at the same time we have this kind of bifurcated view that we have that feeling, but we also feel like, oh, we've done a good job in limiting the problems. We don't have the problems we have in the UK and the US. And I think it's left us uniquely vulnerable to if something really, if there was an outbreak here, I think there would be very, very draconian lockdowns, and I think people would tolerate it. They've kind of grown to the idea of where basically where the UK was 9 months ago or pre-lockdown. So that's a bit scary, and the public is so incurious. Very, very incurious. We signed up with the AstraZeneca jab, and when there were some issues with clotting, the government just decided on a whim, oh, we'll just go with Pfizer, and that just bumped our timetable to reopen by 6 months, and nobody said anything. It's like it was very curious. I mean, the whole thing is very curious. There is very little public resistance to things like face masks. We don't have to wear face masks very often, but even if we did, the public resistance would be very very limited. People don't seem to mind that much about it, and it's all very disheartening.
Gosh.
Yeah, I mean, but like you said, we've all seen the videos, we've seen the photos. I think everyone around the world is aware what's going on in Australia, specifically Melbourne, Victoria, and it does leave everyone puzzled because, from what we understand, the cases are not low. I mean, just extremely, extremely low.
Yeah,
especially for the population of what Melbourne is as a city, as a big city. It's just baffles the mind what's happening there.
Like where I live, we had there was an election campaign, and there was we have the hotel quarantine system that I think a lot of places have, and one hotel guard caught, was infected somehow, and the government threw us into a 5-day lockdown. And this guy was an Uber driver, and he'd been driving half Perth, had half Perth in the back of his car, and the government sort of said, "Oh, he wasn't driving at the times when he was infectious," and he clearly was, given looking at the sites of interest or whatever, what do they call that? Like, he's obviously going to sort of Tesco equivalent places within 3 hours in 3 different spots and service stations. Like, he's obviously driving his rideshare car, and he didn't infect anybody. It was nobody looked at that and thought, well, that's a bit suspicious. That's a bit strange that this one person who lived in a house with 5 other guys, like, he's a university student, he's an Uber driver, he's driving all about town, taking people all around town. He somehow did that, didn't infect anybody, and nobody asked any questions. And again, the kind of language the government's using, and another similar situation where we had somebody who, within the hotel quarantine system, the government, he cleared the 14 days, and then he flew to Melbourne or Sydney, and then he tested positive in Sydney, and again they threw us into this 3-day lockdown, and they were using the sort of then there was no community transmission from that, or maybe one person, but it wasn't significant. And they're using this Keir Starmer type language of, it's a good thing we did. That was a circuit breaker lockdown. This 3-day lockdown. It's completely ridiculous that there was no. I mean, if there had been community transmission, it would have, that lockdown might have slowed it. But given that there wasn't, it was just a precautionary thing. But the public is so uninformed about this, particularly uninformed, and it's. Again, they just went, it was a circuit breaker lockdown. Therefore, that was a good thing. It's just very worrying. If it actually took hold at some point and really ripped through in the way that it did in the UK, I think it would be pretty bleak here for we're actually going into it. Anyway.
Gosh, well, James, that's extremely informative.
It's a very strange situation here, because we're locked down from the rest of the world.
What I find very remarkable about this is of course so counter what our image in Britain is of Australia. We still have a very sort of image of Australia as a very sort of freedom-loving, outdoor, vigorous sort of place, not at all the kind of place where people, are easily persuadable to impose these kind of restrictions on themselves. So to that extent, this has come as a real surprise, actually. I mean, we tend to think of Britain as being very deferential, very obedient, very law-abiding, and Australia as being much more vigorous, much more, if you like, freedom-loving, much more assertive, self-assertive. So, as I said, from a British point of view, this is really rather surprising.
I think that's what we like to tell ourselves as well. But I think it's perhaps not as we're a very politically correct bunch these days. You see the old Australia in rural areas and that kind of thing. But I think in the cities and so on, we're quite conformist. And as I say, we actually haven't had the same kinds of abrogations on our liberties that you've had in the UK. We haven't had extended periods of lockdown. When COVID first kicked in, when people were really scared, everybody just stayed at home because they were scared and didn't know what was going on. But after when that period lifted, we had relative freedom. We didn't have to worry about wearing masks, and nobody was really observing the social distancing rules and all that kind of stuff, which is possibly not particularly useful anyway. But so we haven't really felt any of the actual sort of difficulties that other countries have, and yet we've internalized it, which it's just an odd situation, and it is concerning because if things actually got really bad, I think the government kind of has ground. They know what people will tolerate,
right?
They know they can, and it's also they've also seen what people can tolerate, and they know what they can get away with, and actually they can get away with quite a lot.
Well,
which is concerning. Yeah.
All right, James. Thank you very much for the call.
Thank you.
It sounds to me, and I'll leave it on this note. It sounds to me like they're doing some A/B testing, as we say in the software business, on different countries. That's what it sounds to me like, A/B testing in different countries. Anyway, all right, James. Take care. Take care. Bye-bye. All right. Last caller is Abdul Kahar. I'm going to bring you into the stream if you're ready. Are you with us?
Yep,
Abdul.
I can see it. Hello, Abdul. Abdul.
You're.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Alex. Good afternoon, Alexander.
Hello. We hear you. We hear you and we see you. How you doing?
Glad I'm live with you guys. I'm doing just fine. I'm calling from Abuja, Nigeria. I'm a lawyer. I think last week Friday, I asked a question I asked Alex Zander particularly whether he's going to talk about Nigerian politics, and you guys promised that it's going to happen anytime soon.
We are indeed.
I actually want to ask. Good. And not to take much of your time, sirs, I would like to know, there is this person, Imran Khan. He's a Muslim scholar. He made a statement, I think last night. I was watching his video program on YouTube, and he said none of the Muslim world leaders intervened in the Palestine-Israeli crisis, except for Vladimir Putin. I'm actually a fan of Putin's. Virtually everybody knows that I'm a fan of Russia, Putin, and all that. So I'm trying to verify his statement. Is it true that Lavrov put a word across to Blinken, and then Blinken contacted Netanyahu, and then that's how the whole ceasefire thing came to fruition? I don't know.
That's interesting.
That's interesting. I can't verify it, I'm afraid. I mean, all kinds of things did go on during that time, but what exactly happened and what role the Russians, if any role, what role they exactly played, I don't know. What I will say is that the Russians were talking to people like the Jordanians, the Qataris, to Mahmoud Abbas, who is the leader of the Palestinian Authority. And of course, the Russians also talk to Hamas. Yeah, they talk to Hamas also, which of course the Americans at the moment don't do. And they have a very, very strong and very close relationship with Egypt, which played a key mediation role. So what exact role they played, I don't know. They also, of course, talked to the Israelis too. I mean, the Russians talked to everybody, but whether they were instrumental in setting up the ceasefire, what role exactly they played, I can't tell you. And they're being very, very private and secretive about it. I strongly suspect that they did play a role. They gave all kinds of promises and secured all kinds of promises that their role should not be made too public, because I think from their point of view, at this moment in time, they don't want to be seen to be too heavily involved in this particular conflict in the Middle East. I think they do want stability in that part of the world, but I don't think they want to be seen as a major player in it. But we'll find out. No doubt we will eventually find out.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would like to add that you guys are doing a great hell of work. As I can see, it's all about 10 minutes past 3 hours. God bless you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you.
And we will do that program on Nigeria. We definitely will.
You too.
Yes. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. All right. Great calls. Alexander, let's do some super chats and we will wrap it up. Thank you to Valias, Zarael, GEC, 3 moderators that are doing a great job. Thank you guys for helping us out. And everybody hit that like. We've got 1,170 likes. Awesome.
Wow.
So let me zoom in here, Alexander. Let me zoom in here. All right. Are you with us, Alexander?
Yes.
Yes. You hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'm here.
Okay, great. I just zoomed in and it froze a little bit. All right. From Adam. What would be the global response to a French coup? $2 super chat from Adam. A French coup.
Oh my goodness! Well, I dare not guess. I mean, I think a huge reaction right across Europe. I mean, the crisis within the European Union would be simply off the scale. It's such a enormous event that it's incredibly difficult to predict how it would work out. But I think the first thing that would happen is if there was a coup in France, I mean, I presume you mean a military coup or something of that nature, then, I mean, you'd have an extraordinary meeting of NATO. I mean, that would happen almost at once. I think there'd be a panic crisis across the European Union. I don't know what they would do at the European Union because, of course, the idea of a coup in France is almost unthinkable. And I think that we would see stock markets around the world crash, all kinds of things happen. I mean, France is a pivotal and pivotally important European country. Now, can I quickly say, I don't actually expect a coup. I mean, at least not for the time being. I mean, coups have happened in France. The last time one was seriously threatened was in the early 1960s, which, relatively speaking, is not that long ago. So I don't actually expect a coup in France. It's more likely than it would be in other countries. But the other thing is, I think everything in the political system and in the international system will work to prevent it. And last but not least, though I am somebody who very much wants to see change in France, a coup is not something I would like to see. I lived through a coup in Greece when I was a child. No good came out of it, only bad. And I am somebody who thinks military coups always leave and create major problems in their wake. And I certainly would not want to see something like that happen in France.
All right. Sparky says, terrific show as usual. Great work, Alex and Christo. Thank you very much, Sparky. And Anatoly says, thank you for all your reporting. Once again, forgot to ask, how high is the risk of armed conflict against China?
Well, I think it's higher than it's ever imagined. I would have conceived or imagined. I mean, the last time the US and China came this close, were talking about conflict with each other, was, by the way, about the Taiwan Straits. And that was back in 1958. So it's a long time ago. I still think that these two powers, China and the United States, will want to keep some kind of military distance from each other. But I think it's possible. And one of the problems is that they haven't yet worked out the sort of red lines that each has, in the way that the Soviet Union and the US successfully did in Europe in the 1960s. So we're still in a difficult and dangerous situation, and a miscalculation is indeed possible. So I don't think we're going to go there, but I would frankly say that the chances of it happening are altogether too great to be comfortable with.
All right. And from Sparky, will Trump run for Congress in 2022 because become House Speaker and then run for president in 24? Might work if enough Trumpers are elected to Congress in 2022. I actually recommended this as well. I said Trump should not run for president. He should run for Congress. That would be, and get someone else to run for president. That would be interesting.
That would be astonishing. I gather he's actually, titivating people by talking about the possibility. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to try and read Trump's mind, but I mean, I wouldn't surprise me. Let me put it like that. I would have thought that he would find no difficulty if he wanted to getting himself a House seat somewhere. I mean, that has to be a real possibility, and it's why not? Yeah, absolutely.
That would be great to see Trump in Congress. Just giving everybody hell. That would be great. Anyway, all right, that is everything. I think I got everything, Alexander.
Wow.
I think I got it all.
Wow.
Let me do one final check. Any final thoughts, Alexander, as I do a final check?
Absolutely great chat, and what an enormous range of topics we've discussed, but let's overlook the main one. I mean, this thing that's come out of the G7 is astonishing, and again, that it's the United States that's talking about tax harmonization in this way is really very, very, very remarkable. I mean, I'm one of those people who still remembers things as they used to be in the US, and I still find it very, very strange that all these things are coming out of that country now, which seems so completely unlike what the United States used to be like when I remembered it. Anyway, there we are.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you guys for listening to us on this Monday. Thank you, GEC. I believe it's GC812. Thank you very much for moderating. Thank you, Zarael, for moderating. And thank you to the Great Valley S for moderating as well. We really appreciate it, guys. Thank you to everybody that called in. Great questions, great conversation. Thank you for the super chats. We really appreciate it. And the super chat questions, as always, were top notch, Alexander. Absolutely. And I don't have anything else to say other than we're going to be putting out more videos. Alexander, you've got videos in the pipeline. I've got a few videos. Guys, make sure you check your subscriptions to our channels. Absolutely. Make sure you check those subscriptions and hit the like on the way out from this live stream as well. And what else? Odysee, Super U, BitChute, and Locals join our Locals. Yes, and we're going to be having a bunch of promotions coming up soon, and we'll run some promotions, Alexander, on Greek olive oil. We've got a promo coming out with Greek olive oil company, which is really tasty.
Absolutely. And very good for you also, by the way, if I could say. I mean, if you really want the miracle food of Europe, well, that is it. I mean, olive oil.
At least they left us our olive oil, the EU. At least they gave us that.
Indeed, they did.
We'll see when they come and take that. All right, guys. Take care, everybody. Have a great week, and we'll be live soon again. Take care.
Take care.